Chapter 91. Feng Shui and physiognomy were inseparable. Most Feng Shui masters had some knowledge of physiognomy. Although Grandpa Zhao hadn't reached the Earth Master realm, he had high attainments in Feng Shui. His physiognomy was probably not ordinary either. When Nangong told me about it, I didn't care. But now that Grandpa Zhao mentioned it, I couldn't help but care. While I was frowning and thinking, Grandpa Zhao seemed to have something else to do. He waved his hand and left with Zhang Wenfei without talking to me. Yang Kaichun excused himself and hurried to catch up with them. When they were gone, I turned the matter over in my mind as I walked home alone. Physiognomy masters didn't know much about themselves. They could see the problem from my physiognomy, but I couldn't. I could only make wild guesses. What I needed to do now was to return to the Fire God Temple after the conference. The other thing was the Meow Girl, Zhao Ying. Someone could come to trouble me at any time. The Meow Girl was easy to deal with. It wouldn't be hard for me to get a good result in the conference. Moreover, after the trip to the Fire God Temple, the Feng Shui Association would take care of me. When the Meow people came, no matter who it was, they would have someone to rely on. From the looks of it, what kind of danger would I encounter when I returned to the Fire God Temple? The unknown was always full of variables. It wasn't good to guess blindly. After thinking for a while, I didn't think about it anymore. Just like what Grandpa Zhao had said, I would be more careful these days. As for the rest, I could only wait for things to develop. The next day, Yang Kaichun thought he had something to do, so he didn't come to find me. I got up alone and ate breakfast. Then, I leisurely walked to the conference venue. Yesterday, there were a lot of people in the venue. Today, it was completely full. Besides the many Feng Shui masters who came to watch the competition, there were also many people from the society. All of them had an extraordinary aura. They seemed to be rich and noble. In their daily work, Feng Shui masters came into contact with these officials and nobles. They relied on them to eat. The Metaphysics Association invited these people, so it was a good thing. After sitting down on the contestant seats, I turned to the right. Nangong's seat yesterday was empty. Even when the conference officially started, I didn't see his figure. Now, I believe that this fellow wasn't talking nonsense yesterday. He really didn't want to join the party. The people from the Metaphysics Association also noticed the situation and intentionally delayed the start of the competition. They waited for Nangong for a few minutes, but he didn't appear. They could only helplessly announce that Nangong was disqualified. After the Dragon Seizing Tournament officially began, the examiners yesterday, President Wang and President Xie, were nowhere to be seen. Our Shenzhen branch's President Su took over the main stage. He will be the chief examiner today. Compared to President Wang and President Xie yesterday, President Su was much more old-fashioned, causing the atmosphere to be more depressing. After he announced the start of the competition, he gave out a small booklet similar to the one yesterday. Then, he showed us the Feng Shui map. What was different from yesterday was that today's booklet was a Feng Shui map of the Yang residence. The booklet was very thin, and there were only 3 pictures in total. President Su opened his mouth and announced that today's rules were that each picture would be worth 2 points. The contestants would have to use the Feng Shui of the Yang residence to guess the health and financial situation of the owner's family. If they answered all the questions correctly, they would get 2 points. If they answered incorrectly or missed something, they wouldn't get a single point. This rule was very advantageous to me. Since there were 3 maps, there would definitely be some difficult ones. Even if I couldn't answer the most difficult one, as long as I could answer the other 2 questions correctly, I would at most lose 2 points. In the first round of the competition yesterday, besides Nangong, everyone else had at least 3 points less than me. This meant that even if I answered 1 question incorrectly, I would still be able to obtain first place. Even if I answered 2 questions incorrectly, unless someone answered all the questions correctly and obtained 3 points yesterday, first place would still be mine. With that thought, I didn't feel any pressure. I casually flipped open the booklet and started to read it carefully. I couldn't help but smile when I saw the first question. It was the same as the Feng Shui of the Yang residence, which was ranked 3rd yesterday. This Feng Shui of the Yang residence was basically a free-point question for the contestants. It only violated the most common Feng Shui of the Yang residence, so it would be difficult to answer incorrectly. I didn't think too much and picked up the pen to write. There is water flowing through the house. This is the water that cuts one's feet. It's very inauspicious. The owner of the house lives here and suffers from rheumatism in his early years. Within 5 years, he will definitely have a stroke. After I finished writing, I didn't think too much about it and continued to read. When I saw the second picture, I suddenly laughed. This feng shui map wasn't too simple. Relatively speaking, it could be considered quite difficult. But coincidentally, this map tested the placement of the Yang residence's kitchen door. What was even more coincidental was that the mistake of the kitchen door in the feng shui map was the Qian kitchen door and the Sun Gate's heavenly feng yang pattern. It was the same mistake that our county's feng shui master, Wang Zikan, had made. To me, this question was more like a free-point question. I didn't hesitate to pick up the pen and write. The Qian kitchen door and the Sun Gate, the metal and wood punishment war, the woman is lewd and evil, the family is crazy, the man drowns himself in a well and hangs himself. The qi in the two sides of the body attacks the heart, the legs are sore and numb, the man coughs and becomes paralyzed. After I finished writing, I didn't look at it anymore and directly flipped to the third picture. When I saw the third picture, I frowned. It wasn't that the third picture was difficult, but it was too strange. In the picture, there was a house in an ancient village. There were 2 mountain peaks in front of the house. The one on the left was long and narrow, shaped like a corpse lying on the ground. The one on the right was short and had a few branches that formed the shape of fingers. It looked like the right mountain was a hand that was dragging the corpse-shaped mountain in front of it. In feng shui, this kind of yang residence was called the corpse-dragging mountain. It was very rare. In addition, as long as there was a corpse-dragging mountain, there would be a long and narrow road between the palm-shaped mountain peaks. Moreover, this road would be white. This road was called the neck constriction road. I lowered my head and searched for a while. Soon I found this road. Corpse-dragging mountain, neck constriction road. In theory, these were all ominous geomancy. It should be easy for me to figure out what was going on. However, when I looked at the door, I saw a triangular pond. Moreover, its sharp corner was facing the door. There was a sharp horn at the door. In feng shui, it was called the sharp horn evil spirit. The owner of this house was prone to eye diseases, and he was poor. His health and fortune weren't good. It wasn't the end of it. In the house, there was the Jin Gate, and the Qian master was paired with the Sun stove. This was the combination of wood, earth, and metal. It represented the longevity of a man and a woman. It was also an ominous sign. Seeing so many ominous signs, it was enough to tell me how bad the feng shui of this house was. However, with this kind of geomancy, people would die within 3 to 5 days. Even if they didn't know anything about feng shui, they shouldn't have built such a house. It was really strange. Did the Metaphysics Society build this house with strange feng shui just for this competition? It wasn't impossible. However, I carefully looked at the picture. It was an old house. Moreover, it was quite old. It couldn't have been built recently. After thinking for a long time, I looked at the information about the owner of the house. Then, I arranged the owner's horoscope. After thinking about it for a long time, I finally had an idea. I carefully wrote under the third picture. Life is cheap, house is ominous, but it can be saved in a desperate situation. After I finished writing, I didn't think too much about it. When the time was up, I handed the booklet in. I wasn't sure about the last picture, but I was very sure about the first 2 pictures. The answers couldn't be wrong. This way, even if I couldn't get any points from the last picture, I could still get 4 points. Adding the 6 points I got yesterday, no one could surpass me. I calmly sat in the audience and waited for Chairman Su to review the answers. His usually serious face revealed a trace of happiness. He waved the booklet in his hand and said with a smile, "I've looked through everyone's answers. Just like yesterday, let's announce the scores first." All the 30 feng shui masters who participated in today's competition got points. Among them, 22 people answered 2 questions correctly and got 4 points, including Zhou Yi of the Shenzhen branch. Therefore, the champion of this competition has been determined. Everyone can congratulate Zhou Yi in advance. The person who won the first place in the Dragon Season competition could be called the champion. After Chairman Su finished speaking, the audience burst into applause. However, the applause wasn't very enthusiastic. After all, after yesterday's first feng shui competition and today's Nangon's withdrawal, there was basically no doubt that I would be the champion. Everyone knew it in their hearts. Chapter 92. Double Champion. The person with the highest total score in the Dragon Season contest could be called the champion. But it was not so simple to be the double champion. Not only did he have to win first place, but he also had to get full scores in both competitions. Only then could he be qualified to be called the double champion. I'm sure I'll be the champion, but the double champion is a surprise. The audience below the stage was also shocked. After a moment of silence, they burst into deafening applause. The people of his branch won the championship, and it was a rare double champion. Chairman Su's face was no longer cold, but full of smiles. After the audience calmed down a little, he began to explain the 3 geomancy maps of Yang House in today's assessment. The first one, Cut Feet Water, and the second one, Heaven Fingo, were not too difficult. There were many geomancers who got it right, but Chairman Su still explained it carefully and seriously. The ordinary geomancers under the stage and the guests who came to watch the competition were all fascinated. After the explanation of the 2 pictures, all the contestants cheered up and looked at Chairman Su with shining eyes, waiting for his explanation of the 3rd picture. This geomancy map is actually not difficult. I think everyone can see the pattern of dragging corpses mountain, constricting neck road, recoil evil, and finally the pattern of wood, earth, and metal restraining each other. At this point, President Su paused for a moment and explained the specific details to the guests before continuing. These are all omens of great misfortune, so it's not difficult to identify them. From the answers we've received, most people's final verdict is that evil spirits in a haunted house will definitely perish if they live in it. Only Zhou Yi's judgment is that evil spirits in a haunted house will be revived in a desperate situation. Since only Zhou Yi answered correctly in the end, I think everyone can also find something from this answer, right? Chairman Su asked the audience with a smile after explaining the general situation. Evil spirits in a haunted house will be revived in a desperate situation? Many geomancers under the stage murmured to themselves almost at the same time, and then many people stretched out their hands and pinched their fingers to calculate the 8 characters of the house owner with the turning trigram palm. It didn't take long for someone to ask, doubtfully, life is 1 to 2 to 3, lonely for 100 years. It's really a cheap life. But how can a lowly life be saved in a haunted house? After listening to him, I shook my head. You should be a feng shui master who knew how to read fortunes by bones. However, this kind of fortune-telling technique could only predict 1, 2, and 3 lives. It couldn't predict the life of 1, 3 lives that were worth 1, 3 lives. It was said that the Ming Dynasty Emperor Zhu Yuanzhang, who was born a cowherd, had such a lowly life. Later generations of feng shui masters liked to give Zhu Yuanzhang a story of his success. They made some far-fetched stories about him discovering beautiful acupoints when he was young. But in fact, Zhu Yuanzhang's life, whether in terms of feng shui or physiognomy, was extremely cheap. But this extremely cheap fate, coupled with the extremely cheap feng shui, finally raised a founding emperor. No one could explain the reason behind this, but it probably had something to do with the phrase, joy comes after extreme sorrow. The so-called yin number is 50. Out of 49, there's still one that escapes. The more desperate the situation, the more hope there was. The topic returned to the feng shui map of the Yang House. Although the owner of this house wasn't like Zhu Yuanzhang, who had 1, 3 lives, it was 1, 2 lives, which was even more cheap than 1, 2, 3 lives. In the death scripture, the judgment of 1, 2 lives was, a short life is not a great emptiness. Calamities and difficulties abound. Calamities frequently befall you. You will be trapped in a difficult situation. You will never be able to accomplish anything. The extremely cheap life, coupled with the extremely cheap feng shui, had turned this haunted house into an auspicious one. This was what I meant by coming back from a hopeless situation, in my judgment. The other feng shui masters were still skeptical. This time, Chairman Su didn't ask me to explain. Instead, he carefully explained the feng shui and feng shui. After listening to him, the audience sank into deep thought. Chairman Su didn't give them time to think. After he finished explaining, he immediately announced the top 10 names. According to the rules, the top 10 of the Dragon Seizing Tournament would obtain the right to view the true dragon's vein. This was the final goal of almost everyone. After the results were announced, some were happy, while others were sad. A few lucky ones were so excited that their faces were flushed, while the others sighed with a face full of melancholy. After confirming the name list, Chairman Su invited me onto the stage. With a smile, he gave me the medal for winning first place. The Metaphysics Association's medal was naturally not the same as an ordinary person's. Although it was called a medal, it was actually a special seal of the champion. Among the 5 arts of Taoism, the mountain medicine divination art was divided into 5 types: human physiognomy, name physiognomy, seal physiognomy, tomb physiognomy. There were also 5 types: human physiognomy, name physiognomy, seal physiognomy, mansion physiognomy, and tomb physiognomy. The physiognomy referred to the seal. In ancient times, everyone engraved a seal. Although this custom had declined, there were still people who engraved a luck physiognomy. If the luck physiognomy was suitable for carving, it could help one's luck in a certain matter and achieve success. The Metaphysics Association Champion Seal was actually a magic tool, or rather, a pseudo-magic tool, based on the theory of seal physiognomy. This was because the seal had the power of a magic tool, but it was a consumable item and didn't have a spirit. Even so, the champion seal was no small matter. When it was used, its power was comparable to a heavenly master's attack. Moreover, because it was an attack-type magic tool, it was even more precious. In a crucial moment, it could save a life. Seeing me accept the champion seal, everyone below the stage was envious. Even Chairman Su's expression was filled with envy as he repeatedly congratulated me. Before participating in this competition, Chairman Su had instructed me to represent the Shenzhen branch to fight for the title of champion. Although I didn't take it to heart at that time, the result was a happy ending for everyone. Because of this result, Chairman Su's attitude towards me was obviously much better. He immediately told me that even if the matter regarding the true dragon veins didn't succeed, he would make the decision to promote me to the position of the Shenzhen branch's vice chairman. Furthermore, he clearly told me that if I were to encounter any trouble in the future, I could look for him for help. Chairman Su knew the reason why I joined the Shenzhen Metaphysics Association. His words were a clear promise that if the people from the Miao village came looking for me, he would do his best to protect me. Hearing that, I was elated. After working so hard for so long, I was actually just asking for a protective talisman. Now that Chairman Su had finally promised me, and I even had the champion seal, no matter what Nangong and that old man Zhao saw from me, with the current situation, it would be hard for me to encounter any trouble. Even when I returned to the Flame God Temple, I didn't encounter any life-threatening danger. This time, I had Vice Chairman Yang Shilong, whose power might have reached the Heavenly Master's realm, accompanying me. It was really hard to imagine what kind of life-threatening danger I would encounter. At this moment, the gloominess in my heart was completely swept away. After keeping the champion seal, I walked down the platform amidst the cheers of the crowd. The dragon seizing competition had already ended, but the exchange meeting wasn't over yet. There were still a few more feng shui activities to be held in the next few days. However, to feng shui masters, the following activities weren't very interesting. Apart from the people who were asked by the Metaphysics Association to participate, there weren't many people who were willing to participate. Naturally, I didn't have the mood to participate in the following activities. Moreover, the reason why Vice Chairman Yang Shilong and the rest stayed in Shenzhen was to wait for me to participate in the dragon seizing competition. Now that the dragon season competition had just ended, they were urging me to depart with them. Before departing, I supplemented the route that I had drawn previously and drew out all the details. However, I didn't mention the abnormalities in the Yellow Springs River and the Ghost Valley. On one hand, the situation in those two places had changed when I returned from the Flame God Temple. On the other hand, those two places were extremely dangerous. Even a person of Chairman Su's realm wouldn't necessarily be able to walk out of them. If I explain it too clearly, I wouldn't be able to explain how I had entered and exited the previous time. After everything had been prepared, I set off with Vice Chairman Yang Shilong and the other two directors from the headquarters. We headed towards Shenangjia. In reality, even if the headquarters hadn't sent anyone, I would have returned to the Flame God Temple sooner or later. I was the only one who returned from the previous trip, while the fatty's life and death were unknown. I couldn't let go. Chapter 93. On the second day after the Dragon Seizing Tournament, I met up with Yang Shilong and the rest at the Metaphysics Association. Chairman Su also came to send us off. When Yang Shilong and the rest arrived a few days ago, Chairman Su also requested to go with us to the Fire God Temple. Yang Shilong agreed, but the exchange wasn't over yet. Chairman Su couldn't leave for a while, so he could only send us off regretfully. Shenzhen wasn't too far from Shenangjia. If we took a plane, it would only take 2 to 3 hours. If we left in the morning, we would definitely arrive by noon. Yang Shilong and the other two had been very impatient. I thought they would definitely choose to travel by plane. Unexpectedly, after saying goodbye to Chairman Su and leaving the Metaphysics Association, Yang Shilong and the rest drove 2 cars over and said that they would drive there. I felt strange and asked Yang Shilong. He didn't explain, but asked me in reply, although our cultivation realms are different, we are all in the Geomaster realm. Do you know the meaning of the word Earth in the word Geomaster? The word Earth in Geomaster? I was stunned as I hadn't thought of this question before. Seeing that I didn't answer, Yang Shilong continued, Geomasters aren't just about geography. They also need to obtain power from the Earth. Your current realm isn't high enough, so it might be hard for you to understand. However, when you go back to the headquarters and past the Dragon Luring realm, you should understand the true meaning of a Geomaster. In short, after we Geomasters step onto the path of cultivation, things like planes have nothing to do with us. After saying that, he arranged for me to get in a car with him. The other two directors, Feng Xing and Lu Zheng, got in another car. After getting in the car, I glanced at the back. The seats at the back of the car were all reclined. From the trunk to the back, there were tents, sleeping bags, and other supplies. It seemed that Yang Shilong and the rest had made thorough preparations. After setting off, I was still thinking about what Yang Shilong said. Previously, I had some guesses about his realm and even thought that he was the legendary Heavenly Master. However, according to what he said, he should still be in the Geomaster realm. After thinking for a while, I asked Yang Shilong, Uncle Yang, according to what you said, we Geomasters shouldn't take planes. Won't it be troublesome if we travel far in the future? Is there no way to solve this? Yang Shilong grinned as he drove. There's naturally a solution, and it's very simple. You just need to reach the Celestial Master Realm. One can only take a plane after reaching the Heavenly Master Realm? No. Yang Shilong suddenly turned to look at me. When you reach Heaven's Master level, you don't need to take the plane anymore. I was confused by what he was saying. One moment, he said that the problem of taking a plane could only be solved when one reached the Sky Master Realm. The next moment, he said that there was no need to take a plane when one reached the Sky Master Realm. It sounded contradictory. I wanted to ask more, but Yang Shilong turned around and smiled mysteriously. He didn't say anything else. Feeling helpless, I had to give up. The car left the city and quickly turned onto the highway, speeding all the way to the north. Although Yang Shilong wasn't young, he still had a lot of energy and stamina. Along the way, besides stopping at the service area for lunch, he didn't stop to rest at all. He also didn't let me drive for him. He drove alone for more than 10 hours. When we arrived at Shenangjia, it was late at night. I took them to the hotel we had stayed in the last time. After we settled down at night, I purposely walked around and asked the hotel staff about what had happened. Last time, I had booked a room for half a month with Director Lou's group. In the end, no one came back. Someone in the hotel would definitely notice. Moreover, so many people had gone missing. Although no one came to look for me, I didn't know the specific situation, so I wasn't sure. In the end, I asked a few staff members, but I didn't get any valuable clues. In the end, I found the waiter I had met in the bar last time. That guy still remembered me. He greeted me as soon as he saw me. He smiled and asked me if I had gained anything from the last expedition. He even asked me about the fat guy from last time. I sat down and ordered 2 glasses of wine. Then, I asked him with a smile. I didn't go with him last time. I had something to do, so I left first. I haven't heard from them since. Did you notice that the group of people that went with me came back? About that, I don't really remember, the guy said vaguely, but he was smiling slyly at me. Seeing his expression, I curled my lips. I took out 500 kwai from my wallet and handed it over. The guy took the money, then slammed the table and said, "You asked the right person. Last time, a dozen of you booked a room for half a month, but no one came back. This kind of thing isn't rare in a hotel, so not many people care about it. I talked to you and treated you as a friend." Then, I went to the front desk and asked. That's how I got the situation. So, I was the only one that escaped? I thought for a bit, then asked him, so many people went missing. Did the police or something come to investigate? The waiter shook his head. I didn't see the police come to investigate. However, a few days ago, there was a middle-aged uncle who came here to ask about you guys. Middle-aged uncle? He asked about us? When exactly was it? What did he look like? I hurriedly asked. Last weekend, 2 days ago. I don't know what he looked like, but he was wearing tattered clothes. He looked like someone from the countryside, and when he spoke, he had a northern accent. It was the accent of Shandong and Hunan. I was surprised and changed my hometown's dialect. The waiter immediately nodded and said, "Yes, that's the accent." Someone who spoke my hometown's dialect? Chief Lu and the others were from Kaifeng, and the accent there was different from mine. Moreover, if they came to find Chief Lu and the others, they must be from the city. It was impossible for them to wear tattered clothes and speak a dialect. If they spoke the dialect from my hometown, they must have come to find me or the fatty. However, I didn't go missing, so they didn't need to come here to find me. The only possibility was that they came to find the fatty. However, the fatty left his hometown when he was in high school, and I didn't hear that he had any relatives. If they came to find a fatty and spoke the dialect from my hometown, I couldn't think of anything. At this moment, the waiter excitedly asked us, "What do you do? Do you go to the mountains to rob tombs?" He swore that he wouldn't tell anyone. Looking at his excited face, I couldn't help but laugh. It was normal to rob tombs in the mountains, but I had never heard of a big tomb in a primitive forest like Shenangjia. I wasn't in a good mood and gave him a stack of money. I gave him my phone number and asked him to pay attention to this case. If he saw the people who had been with me, or if someone else asked about this case, he should call me. Since we had money to open the way, the waiter agreed without any hesitation. After we settled this matter, it was already midnight. I didn't dare to linger and returned to my room to rest. The next morning, the 4 of us gathered together. After eating breakfast, we carried the supplies we had prepared and set off into the depths of the mountain. The last time we entered the mountain, Chief Lu brought a group of special forces, tents, sleeping bags, and all kinds of supplies. I didn't have to carry them at all, so the journey was very easy. But this time, I had to carry dozens of kilograms of things on my back and walk forward step by step. It wasn't as easy as last time. Fortunately, after I had entered the Earthmaster realm, my body was much stronger than ordinary people. It wasn't too difficult to carry these things. This time, our speed wasn't much different from the last time. After one morning, we arrived at the Yellow Spring River. Just like me at that time, Yang Shilong and the other 2 didn't notice the abnormality of the river. Instead, they raised their heads to look at the canyon not far away. They couldn't help but show joy on their faces as they asked me, "Is this the remnant of the true dragon vein?" I nodded, but my eyes were focused on the river in front of me. The last time I came back, the river was almost dry, so I climbed along the rock wall at the source. But now, from the surface of the river seemed to have returned to its original flow. The rock wall that I could climb must have been submerged under the water again. Chapter 94. Yang Shilong and the others excitedly discussed the dragon vein in the canyon for a long time. Then, they turned around and asked me casually, "How do we cross this river? Is there a bridge nearby?" I shook my head. "There's no bridge, and this river is really strange." "Strange?" Yang Shilong was surprised. "Tell me the details." Then, I told him about the last time we sent people to cross the river and how they disappeared mysteriously. After I finished, Fong Xing, one of the two directors, frowned and asked, "Disappeared? Could there be some kind of water monster in the water?" As soon as he said that, Yang Shilong gestured for us not to talk. He walked to the riverside and looked at the water for a long time. Then, he shook his head with a puzzled face. "The water has a lot of yin energy, but water belongs to the yin attribute. It's not wrong to have a lot of yin energy. Besides that, I don't see anything strange." The three of them discussed for a while. Eventually, Yang Shilong turned to me and asked, "How did you cross the river last time?" I considered for a while, then told them about how I had gotten the villagers to cross the river. At first, Yang Shilong and the others looked normal. However, when I talked about the large number of floating corpses flowing down the river and the floating corpse bridge, the three of them looked shocked. When I told him about the black zombies and the golden head that popped up from the bottom of the lake, Yang Shilong was shocked. He looked at me in disbelief. After telling them everything in one breath, I added, "The floating corpse bridge only appears on the 1st and 15th day of each lunar month. Today is the 28th day of the 9th lunar month. If we can't find another way to cross the river, we will have to rest by the riverside for 2 days. We will cross the river the day after tomorrow." Yang Shilong thought for a long time. In the end, he decided to set up camp by the riverside. We would use these 2 days to try other methods. If it didn't work, we would have to wait for the floating corpse bridge to appear 2 days later. I was just a guide, and Yang Shilong was the leader. Since he had made the decision, we had to follow him. We set up camp by the riverside to rest. For the next 2 days, Yang Shilong and the other two stayed by the riverside to study the strange features of the river and discuss other ways to cross the river. I wasn't interested in their topic. Ever since I saw the terrifying golden head at the bottom of the river, I was filled with respect for the river. If it wasn't for the fatty who had disappeared in the fire god temple, I wouldn't have been willing to come back, even if I was beaten to death. As for studying the strangeness of the river, it was better to leave this matter to an expert like Yang Shilong. In these 2 days, I basically stayed in my own tent, thinking about whether or not I should borrow Yang Shilong and the rest's power to summon the fire god temple again. Fatty had disappeared into the fire god temple. If he wanted to find Fatty, he had to find a fire god temple first. Back then, I saw the method director Lu used to summon the fire god temple. As long as I can find someone like the fatty who has the experience and a sacrificial person, I should be able to summon the fire god temple again. It will definitely be difficult for me to do this alone, but using Yang Shilong and the power of the Metaphysics Union to summon the fire god temple is almost effortless. The only problem was that the last time I stood outside the fire god temple, I couldn't enter. Even if I summoned the fire god temple this time, would I be able to enter? If I couldn't enter, then I could only ask someone else to go in and find Fatty. However, the people from the Metaphysics Union probably wouldn't do their best to find him. After thinking about it for 2 days, I couldn't confirm if I should tell Yang Shilong and the rest, so I could only take it one step at a time. When I arrived at the fire god temple, I would observe the situation before deciding on my next step. Very quickly, 2 days passed. At noon on the 30th of September, we packed our luggage. The 4 of us stood by the river, waiting for the floating corpses to appear. At around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the first black appeared in the distant river. When the first corpse floated in front of us, countless black dots appeared in the distance, forming a black line. Since I had explained the situation before, Yang Shilong and the rest weren't too shocked. They only observed the corpse on the surface of the river and nodded. It really is a soulless corpse. After studying it for a while, we started swimming towards the river. Along the way, countless corpses floated past us. Even though it was the second time I encountered this situation, I still couldn't help but feel scared. Since we set out early this time, it was still daytime when we reached the upper reaches of the river. At this time, there wasn't a floating corpse bridge at the upper reaches of the river. However, every 10 seconds or so, a corpse would float up from the bottom of the river and slowly float downstream. We sat by the river and slowly waited. Gradually, the night sky enveloped us, and the sky became dark. The last time I came here, it was the 15th of the lunar calendar. After the sky turned dark, the moonlight shone brightly, and everything on the river could be seen clearly. However, this time, it was the first day of the lunar calendar. There was no trace of the moon in the sky, and we were in the depths of the forest. So when night fell, the sky was dark, and only the light from the flashlights in our hands could be seen. I held the flashlight and shone it towards the middle of the river. There were continuously dried corpses that floated up from the bottom of the river. Under the light of the flashlight, it was as if their entire bodies were emitting black light. It looked extremely scary. Strangely enough, those corpses were soaking in the water, but none of them had swollen up. Quite the contrary, they all looked dry and shriveled. They didn't look like corpses that had died in the water. Instead, they looked like dried corpses that had been blown away by the wind in the desert. We looked at the corpses on the surface of the river until midnight. All of a sudden, a bubbling sound came from the water. We hurried to use the flashlight to see. There were a lot of bubbles and white foam rising from the surface of the water. This situation lasted for around 2 minutes. Then, the bubbles and white foam disappeared, replaced by a sea of black corpses. Now, I knew that the corpses that made up the floating corpse bridge had appeared all at once. The situation in the water looked like a massive school of black fish that had suddenly jumped into a small pond. All of a sudden, they rose from the bottom of the water to the surface, crowding together. It looked strange and absurd. Just like Yang Shilong and the others, it was the first time we had seen such a strange scene. We stood by the river and held the flashlight in our hands. We kept silent and didn't know what to say. Around 1 or 2 minutes later, a layer of corpses appeared on the surface of the water, blocking the entire river and forming a floating corpse bridge. Although Yang Shilong was interested in the golden head underwater, the most urgent matter at hand was to cross the river. Shortly after, he reacted. He waved his hand and said to us, "We shouldn't delay any longer. Let's cross the river." After saying that, he took a step forward and directly jumped onto the floating corpses in the river. The 3 of us follow behind, and we're about to jump onto the floating corpses. Right at this moment, I heard footsteps next to me. Instinctively, I lifted my head and saw a shadow dashing past us. It jumped onto the bridge of floating corpses. Then, it didn't stop and directly ran to the other side of the river. I wasn't the only one who was startled. Yang Shilong and the others were also startled. They couldn't react in time and just let the shadow run past them. Before we could react, the shadow had reached the center of the river. The Yellow Spring River was a deserted place. After we had left the scenic area, we hadn't met anyone along the way. How could we coincidentally meet someone here? Before I could figure it out, Fong Xing, who was standing next to me, shouted, "Who are you? Why are you following us?" I was surprised. Did this person follow us here? After Fong Xing shouted, the shadow stopped at the center of the river. However, it immediately moved to the other side of the river. Fong Xing was enraged. He took out a magic tool that looked like a folding fan and raised his hand to draw the Tao energy. Yang Shilong, who was standing not far from him, raised his hand to stop him. This place was full of floating corpses, and I had told them about the black zombie incident. No matter what, we shouldn't use our Tao energy here. We couldn't be sure if something unexpected would happen. Fong Xing reluctantly stopped. We could only stare at the shadow crossing the river. It was strange that after the person reached the other side of the river, he didn't hurry to leave. Instead, he turned around and looked at us from a distance. Yang Shilong and the others had prepared excellent equipment for this trip. For example, their flashlights were military-grade LED flashlights. Even though they were dozens of meters away from the river, they could still see the person's face clearly. So, The moment the man turned around, I saw his face. Then, I was completely shocked. Chapter 95. The fatty's father didn't die? That's impossible. At that time, I was standing in front of Lin Oching and saw him stab the dagger into his own chest. How could he not be dead? But if he was dead, who was standing on the other side of the river? Also, why did the fatty tell me that he suspected that his father wasn't dead? At that time, I thought that the fatty was just imagining things, so I didn't take it to heart. Now, I was completely dumbfounded. Lin Oching stood on the other side of the river. Under the light of the flashlight, his face didn't show any expression. His eyes were just as dull as before. After looking at us for a while, he turned around and disappeared into the darkness. Who was that? Have you seen him before? After Lin Oching disappeared, Yang Shilong turned to ask me with a gloomy face. I kept silent for a while, then shook my head. It was too dark. I didn't see him clearly. The fatty's father's case was too strange. Instinctively, I didn't want to tell anyone. Yang Shilong frowned and seemed to want to ask something. Fong Xing, who was standing on the side, opened his mouth first. He said angrily, "These 2 days, I felt that something was wrong. I always felt that someone was spying on us, but I couldn't find any obvious signs. I didn't expect it to be that person. I don't know his purpose yet, but his strength isn't bad. At least, he's not weaker than me." I was surprised. Not weaker than Fong Xing? He's the director of the Metaphysics Union. His strength is at least on the same level as Chairman Su. He's at the peak of Geomasters. How could the fatty's father have this kind of strength? Although I hadn't started cultivating that year from the talismans that old he and the others used, I could roughly guess that they were at the Geomaster realm, which was similar to my current strength. At most, they were 1 realm higher than me. At that time, old he's strength wasn't just 1 realm higher than the fatty's father's. Based on this, the fatty's father's strength was at the same level as mine when I was in university. It had only been a few years, and the fatty's father was getting old. Even if he was still alive, how could he have this kind of strength? Was I wrong? Or did this person just look like the fatty's father? But how could there be such a coincidence? A person who looked exactly like the fatty's father and happened to be a feng shui master, and I even met him? After thinking for a long time, my brain was still a mess. As for Yang Shilong and the others, they began to discuss that person's strength and speculate about that person's objective. They were all worried about whether that person had also discovered the true dragon's vein. With this conjecture, Yang Shilong and the others' expressions became even more gloomy. Fearing that something might happen to the true dragon vein, they all sped up and rushed to the other side of the river. Perhaps it was because there was no moon in the sky, but no matter if it was that person or us, when we crossed the river, the floating corpses didn't move at all. We smoothly reached the riverbank. On the way here, Yang Shilong and the others were still very interested in the golden head at the bottom of the river, but now they couldn't care less. After reaching the other side of the river, they hurriedly continued forward, trying to find traces of the person from before. However, the strange thing was that no matter how hard we searched, that person seemed to have disappeared. There was not a single trace left. Helplessly, Yang Shilong told us to go back to the riverside to set up camp and rest. Because of this delay, when we returned to the river, the water had returned to its calm state. There wasn't a single corpse to be seen. It was as if the bridge of corpses had never appeared. Moreover, the golden head was nowhere to be seen. I didn't even know if it had appeared this time or not. After setting up camp, due to the appearance of that person, we couldn't relax as much as we had in the past few days. Yang Shilong arranged for Lu Zheng and Fong Xing to be on night watch. He said that at least one of them had to be awake at night to ensure our safety. Usually, a geomancy master wouldn't be affected too much if he didn't sleep for 1 or 2 days. However, the following journey wasn't going to last for 1 or 2 days. We had to arrange a reasonable plan to ensure the smooth journey. I also volunteered to be on night watch. However, before Yang Shilong could say anything, Fong Xing curled his lips and told me, "With your current power, I can't be at ease. You should go back to sleep." Feeling helpless, I had to return to my tent to sleep. After returning to my tent, I got into my sleeping bag and tossed and turned. I couldn't fall asleep no matter how hard I tried. What had happened today had shocked me so much that I couldn't calm down no matter how hard I tried. However, after thinking about it for a while, I suddenly realized that if that person was really the fatty's father, regardless of how he came back to life, it would be good for me if he suddenly appeared here. Fatty had disappeared here, so Fatty's father must have come here to save Fatty. Previously, I was worried that I wouldn't be able to enter the Fire God Temple, and the people from the Metaphysics Association weren't reliable. But now, the Fatty's father was here. As long as I could open the Fire God Temple, the Fatty's father would be able to enter. He would try his best to find the Fatty. With that in mind, I suddenly felt more confident about rescuing the Fatty. The night passed without incident. The next morning, Fong Xing, who was on night watch, woke us up. We packed up and continued to move forward. After crossing the Yellow Spring River, we entered the Ghost Valley. The landscape of the Crimson Crescent Gorge was revealed in front of us. As geomancers, Yang Shilong and the others couldn't help but be attracted. They started to talk about the landscape in front of us. Yang Shilong could even see the aura of the embryonic dragon vein. He was an experienced geomancer. I had discovered the embryonic dragon vein after I had left the Ghost Valley. Who would have thought that Yang Shilong would be able to sense the aura of the embryonic dragon vein before he even entered the gorge? Of course, it was also because he knew that there was a remnant of a true dragon vein in front of him. After talking about the true dragon vein, the atmosphere in the team relaxed a little. We didn't mention the person we had met last night. However, this relaxed atmosphere didn't last long. When we entered the gorge, Yang Shilong and the others' faces turned serious. After taking a few steps, Fong Xing asked in bewilderment, "Is it my imagination or something? Why do I feel such dense yin qi in a canyon with such good feng shui?" Yang Shilong shook his head and frowned. "It's not your imagination. This gorge is strange. Guys, you should be careful." Then, he turned to me and asked, "Did we encounter these ghosts the last time we came here?" I nodded and told them about the large number of ghosts in this gorge. However, I didn't tell them the number that we saw the last time. After all, I had collected all the ghosts from the last time. Although there were more ghosts coming out of the gorge, I wasn't sure how many there were. I could only give them a vague number. As soon as Fong Xing and Lu Zheng heard that it was just a group of ghosts, their faces relaxed. Although ghosts were hard to deal with, to people at their realm, killing a ghost wasn't as difficult as killing an ant. That was why they didn't put ghosts in their eyes. When we entered the depths of the gorge, we saw a large group of ghosts. It looked like they had formed a small army. Yang Shilong and the others became tense again. In fact, the number of ghosts was much smaller than the first time I'd come here. They were only 1/5 of the number from the last time. Even so, there were more than 10,000 of them. As soon as they saw us, the ghosts that didn't have much consciousness started to approach us. Seeing this, Yang Shilong quickly calmed down. He arranged for the 4 of us to guard one direction each and began to eliminate the ghosts that were coming at us. After that, I finally saw the real power of Yang Shilong and the others. Fong Xing, who was standing next to me, was holding the folding fan magic tool I had seen yesterday. He waved it casually, and a large number of ghosts disappeared. Lu Zheng and Yang Shilong weren't inferior either. It was easy for them to deal with the ghosts. I was the only one who was struggling. However, I had stored enough talismans these days. With the support of these talismans and the help of Yang Shilong and the others from time to time, these ghosts couldn't do anything to me for the time being. While eliminating the ghosts, I felt a little heartache. If I could send so many ghosts to Tong Tong's jade bracelet, her power would increase. Unfortunately, I didn't dare to bet on Yang Shilong and the others. I couldn't let Tong Tong take the risk. I could only reluctantly give up on these ghosts. After 2 or 3 hours, the Tao energy in my body was almost used up. Finally, the number of ghosts in front of me became less and less. The previous army was gone, and only a few ghosts were left. They came to me one by one, seeking their deaths. I gritted my teeth. As I was about to eliminate the last of the ghosts, a vague ghost appeared in front of me. It swayed and walked toward me. At first, I didn't pay attention to it. Out of habit, I wanted to eliminate it. However, when the talisman in my hand was about to touch the ghost, I found that the ghost's face was somewhat familiar. When I took a closer look, I was startled. That ghost was none other than President Liu. After a person died, if they were lucky enough to form a ghost, they would have the same appearance as when they died. This Ean's soul should be the Ean soul that was formed after Chief Liu's death. However, Chief Liu had disappeared from the fire god temple. How could a ghost come here? Moreover, if Chief Liu was dead, what about the fatty and the others? Were they also dead? Chapter 96. At this moment, there weren't many ghosts left. I didn't need to look for them. I just needed to lift my head to see their appearances. However, except for Chief Liu, I couldn't find anyone else who had traveled with us. Did I get the wrong person? I turned around and saw that the ghost that looked exactly like Chief Liu was still in front of me. It didn't want to leave me alone. I studied him for a while to confirm that he was Chief Liu's ghost. Then, I used a talisman to destroy him. After I had destroyed Chief Liu's ghost, the others had also destroyed all the other ghosts. The four of us regrouped and continued on our way. Along the way, we encountered a few scattered ghosts. Yang Shilong and the others didn't even need to take action. They killed them easily. While walking, they discussed the reason why there were so many ghosts here. I anxiously watched the ghosts that we encountered. However, I didn't see anyone else until we got out of the canyon. I heaved a sigh of relief when I didn't see the fat man's ghost. However, the appearance of Chief Liu's ghost meant that they were in danger. I was more worried about the fat man. After we got out of the canyon, the terrain of the embryonic breath dragon vein appeared. Yang Shilong and the others gave up on guessing the reason why there were so many ghosts. Instead, they focused on observing the embryonic breath dragon vein. It was the same as the last time we came here. It was much safer along the way. Although it was harder to walk, we didn't encounter any other dangers. Moreover, the further we went, the more obvious the signs of the true dragon vein became. Yang Shilong and the others became excited. When we got close to the fire god temple, the terrain of the ancestral dragon vein also appeared. Yang Shilong and the other two were excited. Feng Xing even said that he had sensed the aura of the true dragon vein. There must be a true dragon vein in front of us. Yang Shilong wasn't so sure. However, he smiled and urged us to move faster. Eventually, after following the ancestral dragon vein for another day, the forest in front of us suddenly widened. We saw a lush green grassland with a murmuring stream. We had finally arrived at the stream where the fire god temple had appeared that day. Without waiting for my reminder, Yang Shilong stopped walking and said, "The aura of the true dragon vein is here." Feng Xing and Lu Zheng had obviously noticed this as well. They nodded at the same time, but their expressions were a little solemn. Feng Xing asked, "Old Lu, do you feel anything strange?" Lu Zheng was a man of few words. However, at that moment, he said, "The aura of the true dragon vein is right before us. According to my senses, the aura of the true dragon vein is so thick that it feels like it is right before us. However, I cannot see it with my eyes." Feng Xing also nodded and speculated with some hesitation. Could it be that some mighty figure discovered the true dragon vein before us and used some sort of concealment technique to hide the true dragon vein from us? Lu Zheng did not speak again. Yang Shilong continued, "That is also a possibility. However, sometimes the supernatural workmanship of nature is more mysterious than the Tao techniques of the Heavenly Master. We should first search for it before coming to a conclusion." With that said, a very small sword-shaped object suddenly appeared in Yang Shilong's hand. It was only the length of a finger, and it looked like it was made of a few small copper coins welded together. It was very exquisite. However, from its appearance, I could not sense any Tao Qi fluctuations. However, for Yang Shilong to take it out at this time, it was definitely not an ordinary item. At the very least, it was an artifact. Just as I was secretly guessing, Yang Shilong suddenly chanted a long and complicated incantation. After he finished chanting, the pocket-sized copper coin sword seemed to be filled with air. it grew with the wind, and in an instant, it actually became a long sword that was about a meter long. Furthermore, the 9 copper coins on the body of the sword emitted strong Tao Chi fluctuations. I have seen many artifacts, and I even have one a half with me. One is the compass that the snake spirit was in, and the other is the double champion seal that the Metaphysics Association had rewarded me with after the dragon seizing war. Logically speaking, the compass had the snake spirit that had almost turned into a flood dragon when it was alive, and the double champion seal could release an attack that was almost equivalent to the power of a heavenly master. However, the Tao Chi fluctuations on these 2 items added together were not even a tenth of the Tao Chi fluctuations on the copper coin sword in Yang Shilong's hand. Not only was I shocked, but Lu Zheng and Fang Xing's eyes were also filled with surprise. Fang Xing even asked, "Senior Yang, you can already nurture your sword to the finest detail?" Yang Shilong shook his head and said, "It can't be considered as the finest detail. I can barely be considered as a dabbler." Although he said that, I could see from the intense envy in Fang Xing's eyes that Yang Shilong's move was not ordinary. After taking out the copper coin sword, Yang Shilong held the long sword in his hand and waved it horizontally and vertically in the air in front of him. Following his movements, 2 horizontal and 2 vertical marks appeared in the air. In total, there were 4 marks formed by Tao Chi, forming the character Jing in the air. This was simply subverting everything I knew. Back when I had been stuck in the Earthmaster realm, Deng Ming had told me that Qi was illusory and didn't exist. One had to rely on the combination of Tao Qi and Yin and Yang Qi to activate power. It was because of his words that I had broken through the final barrier and entered the Earthmaster realm. But now, the illusory Tao Qi that Deng Ming had said didn't exist had been drawn out by Yang Shilong using the copper coin sword. Not only that, but he had also made the 4 marks of Tao Qi visible to the naked eye. What kind of power was this? I subconsciously thought that this was the power of a heavenly master. However, Yang Shilong had told me that he was still only an Earthmaster. The power of an Earthmaster had already subverted my understanding of Tao Qi. What kind of power was a heavenly master? While I was still in shock, the 4 marks of Tao Qi suddenly spread out from Yang Shilong's body. As it spread, it became bigger and bigger. In the end, it seemed to encompass the entire world. At this time, I roughly understood the purpose of Yang Shilong's drawing. He must have used pure Tao Qi to detect if there were any fluctuations of power in the void in front of us. From there, he could determine if there was something hiding the true dragon vein that they had already sensed. I had to admit that Yang Shilong's idea was completely correct. At that time, after the fatty had divined the secrets of heaven and Zhao Yongquan had sacrificed his life, the Fire God Temple had slowly appeared in this void. This also proved that the Fire God Temple was in the void in front of us. However, the strange thing was that Yang Shilong's drawing seemed to have enveloped the entire world. However, he still didn't discover any abnormalities in the void. Apart from a slight pause in the middle, it continued to float far away without any obstruction and finally disappeared in the void. Yang Shilong withdrew the copper coin, sword in his hand, and frowned. He said hesitantly, "This void seems to be a little strange, but the Jing Qi couldn't be detected. Could it be that it was really a mysterious formation set up by some almighty person?" The 3 of them discussed for a long time, but in the end, they didn't get a definite answer. At this time, it was already late. Yang Shilong told us to set up camp and wait until tomorrow to decide. At night, it was still Fang Xing and Lu Zheng who were on night duty. Although I was lying in the tent, I couldn't fall asleep. I kept making decisions in my heart. Should I tell them the secret of the Fire God Temple? Just as I was hesitating, someone suddenly knocked on the outside of my tent in the middle of the night. I thought it was Fang Xing or Lu Zheng who was on night duty looking for me, so I opened the zipper of the single-person tent. In the end, the person who appeared in front of me was the mysterious person from a few days ago. Before I could say anything, he pointed at the forest not far away from me. Then, he quietly retreated and disappeared into the darkness. I understood what he meant. He He wanted me to go to the small forest to talk. Although I was suspicious of this person's identity and knew that I might encounter danger if I rashly approached him, I couldn't help but be curious. I hesitated for a while before leaving the tent. Using the excuse of going to the toilet, I quietly followed him into the forest. Just as I walked in, I saw the person standing not far away from me with his back facing me. I hesitated for a while, then asked, "Uncle Lin, is it you?" After staying silent for a while, the person answered with a muffled voice, "It's me." His voice was low and stiff, exactly the same as the fatty's dad in my memory. I was pretty sure that the person in front of me was the fatty's dad. I asked anxiously, "Uncle Lin, I remember that you already," without waiting for me to finish. The fatty's dad suddenly turned his head, extended his hand, and interrupted me, then said to me, "Let's not talk about my matter for now. I came to you today to tell you that I already know about Huzi's matter. You don't need to get involved in this matter. I will bring him back. Also, someone asked me to bring you something. I want to hand it to you personally." I was stunned for a while before I reacted. He really did know about the fatty's matter. But how did he know about the fire god temple? And how did he have the confidence to bring the fatty back? Although I was suspicious, I didn't ask further. Since he was the fatty's dad, he was far more concerned about the fatty's safety than me. Since he said that, then he must have some confidence. What made me even more suspicious was the last part of his sentence. Someone asked him to bring me something? Who would have to go through his hands to give me something? Before I could figure out what was going on, the fatty's father had already thrown a black thing to me. Then, he turned around and left without hesitation. I didn't care about the fatty's dad for now and lower my head to look at the thing in my hand. Under the dim light of the night, I took a closer look at what I thought was a black mass. It wasn't black at all. It was a red, cloth-like object. When I opened it, I realized that it was a red handkerchief with 2 lines of small words embroidered on it. The night was dark, so I couldn't see the words clearly. But looking at the red handkerchief, the figure with the same color appeared in my head. Chapter 97. It had been a few years since we parted that year, and I hadn't heard from Red Shadow at all. Even my memories of her were blurry. Only when I saw Yu Huan would I remember her from back then, as well as her words, "Take care, husband." I thought that everything that happened back then would just be a dream, but I didn't expect Red Shadow to suddenly send me news. I held the red handkerchief in my hand. I was so excited that I was shivering. I stood there and took a few deep breaths to calm myself down. Then, I carefully turned on the flashlight and shone it on the handkerchief. There was a line of beautiful words embroidered on it, and it shone in my eyes under the light of the flashlight. The black dragon and Qilin knot, parting gracefully. The bright star suddenly reappears, and when we meet again, we will hold hands. The words on the handkerchief were out of my expectations, and it was hard to understand. I couldn't tell what it meant at the moment. Since I'd been out for quite some time, I was worried that Feng Xing and the rest, who were on night duty, would notice something amiss and come looking for me. I didn't have time to study the words, and quickly put the handkerchief away and returned to my tent. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I held the handkerchief in my hand and continuously pondered over the meaning of the 4 sentences. I couldn't understand the first 2 sentences, and the third seemed to be related to the bright star. What made me the most excited was the 4th sentence because there were 2 words in it, "meet again." I could vaguely understand the meaning of the last 2 sentences. It seemed that Red Shadow had agreed on a day when the bright star would suddenly reappear, and then we would meet again. Red Shadow had said that we would meet again if we were fated. Could this, the bright star suddenly reappear, be the fate that she had mentioned? But what did the bright star suddenly reappear mean? Bright star, bright star. Could it be that when I reached the glory of Knowledge Realm, I would be able to meet her again? Thinking about it that way, I felt that it was highly possible. Back then, Red Shadow had given me the death scripture and allowed me to walk the path of a feng shui master. Now that she had used the realm of feng shui to make a promise with me, it seemed easy to understand. The glory of Knowledge Realm is the last stage of a geomaster. Back then, Zhao Yongquan had just entered the glory of Knowledge Realm. After that, the Shenzhen Metaphysics Association's president Su as well as Yang Shilong and the others who came with me this time, were all theoretically at this stage. Among these people, Zhao Yongquan's strength was the weakest while Yang Shilong should be the strongest. Moreover, from my observations, the difference in strength between the two of them was quite large. It seemed that there was still a long way to go between the beginner level and the great mastery level. However, this had nothing to do with the Red Shadow's promise. If the Red Shadow really meant this, then as long as I could enter the glory of knowledge stage, I should have met the requirements. I didn't sleep the entire night. The next morning, I was still wide awake and excited. After they woke up, Yang Shilong and the other two had already gathered together to discuss something. Looking at their attitudes, they would not rest until they found the hidden true dragon vein. However, just as I had expected, the three of them worked hard for an entire day, but in the end, they still couldn't find anything. They could only helplessly look at the empty space in front of them. That night, Yang Shilong called me over again and asked me to tell him the details of the last time I saw the true dragon vein. Originally, I had only come here to find the fatty. If he had asked me yesterday, I might have hesitated on whether or not I should tell him about the Fire God Temple. However, the previous night, the fatty's father had already told me not to care about this matter, so I naturally wouldn't say anything more. I only told him that the last time I came here, there was a mountain range and the true dragon vein was on top of it. However, the true dragon vein had disappeared a day later. Seeing that he couldn't get any useful information from me, Yang Shilong could only helplessly ask me to return while they continued to think of a solution. In the next few days, Yang Shilong looked as though he was going to stay here and didn't have any intention of leaving. He sat by the stream every day and stared at the empty space in front of him. Sometimes he wouldn't even eat and would just sit there for an entire day. Yang Shilong and the others still didn't move even after we ran out of supplies. I couldn't sit still anymore and proactively went to ask the three of them. After persuading them for a long time, Yang Shilong finally agreed to stay here for another day. If we still couldn't find any valuable clues, we would retreat first. I finally heaved a sigh of relief and went to pack my luggage, preparing to leave. However, in the early morning of the second day, while I was sleeping, there was a sudden earth-shaking explosion that woke me up from my dream. I hurried out of the tent to take a look, and I was dumbstruck. Not far from our tents, there was a huge flame burning in the air. It lit up the originally dark night sky as if it was daytime. Not far from the flame stood a person. I took a closer look and saw that it was the fatty's father, Lin Acheng. That day, he had hurriedly left after saying a few words to me. In the next few days, I didn't receive any news from him. I thought that he had already left. I didn't expect that he would suddenly appear again today. Moreover, he had appeared in front of all of us in such a high-profile manner. At this moment, Yang Shilong and the other two also walked over. They lifted their heads to look at Lin Acheng. However, Lin Acheng didn't look at us. His eyes were focused on the burning flame in the air. Looking at him, Yang Shilong and the other two didn't take action. They also stayed there, waiting to see what he would do next. Not long after, a black suddenly appeared in the middle of the burning fireball. Then, the black dot gradually expanded. In the end, it became a hole made of flames. Under the illumination of the surrounding flames, it looked very deep. The hole was really big, and it was facing me. However, no matter how hard I rubbed my eyes, I couldn't see what was inside. At this moment, the fatty's father turned to look at us. Then, he didn't hesitate to lift his leg and jump. He wanted to enter the deep hole. Yang Shilong, who hadn't said a word, suddenly shouted, "There's the aura of the true dragon's vein inside the hole. Let's follow him." Then, he didn't care about the others and dashed toward the hole. He was an old man, but his speed was surprisingly fast. Fang Xing and Lu Zheng hesitated for a moment, but they immediately followed him. The three of them were very fast. In the blink of an eye, they were close to the hole. At this moment, the fatty's father wasn't in a hurry. After he jumped into the hole, he didn't walk in directly. Instead, he turned around and stood there calmly. His cold eyes gazed at Yang Shilong and the other two who were rapidly approaching. Finally, Yang Shilong was the first to reach the bottom of the hole. He didn't stop and lifted his leg to jump into the hole. At this moment, Lin Aching finally made a move. A black object suddenly appeared in his hand. It looked like a rock. Just like that, Lin Aching raised a stone-like object and threw it at Yang Shilong in a comical manner. Yang Shilong seemed to be prepared. I didn't see him move, but the copper coin sword that I saw a few days ago appeared in his hand. Then he threw it with both hands, and the copper coin sword flew into the air. Then it slashed down at Lin Aching's head. When the copper coin sword slashed down, the stone in Lin Aching's hand also flew into the air and hit the copper coin sword, creating a loud explosion. Following that, the momentum of the stone continued to fly towards Yang Shilong, and the copper coin sword that could change its size at what was smashed down from the air. When it landed on the ground, the copper coins on the sword seemed to have been smashed into pieces. Seeing that Yang Shilong was about to be hit by Lin Aching's black stone, Feng Xing and Lu Zheng, who had arrived from behind, quickly took out their personal magic tools and barely managed to block the attack. Even so, the three of them still suffered heavy injuries and staggered back a few steps. Seeing this scene, I was shocked. A few days ago, when Feng Xing said that the fatty's father's strength wasn't inferior to his, I was very surprised. But now it seemed that Lin Aching had defeated Yang Shilong and the other two in one move. His strength was much stronger than I had imagined. Chapter 98. After being defeated in one move, Yang Shilong and the other two stood at the bottom of the flame hole and looked at Lin Aching in bewilderment, not daring to act rashly. After Lin Aching kept the black stone-like object, he didn't make another move. He just stood at the hole and looked coldly at Yang Shilong and the rest. Only when the flames around the hole became fainter did Lin Aching look at me from afar. Then he turned around expressionlessly and walked into the hole. As though he had calculated it, the moment his figure disappeared, the flames outside the hole also quickly extinguished. When the last wisp of flame disappeared, all that was left in front of us was darkness. The hole from before didn't seem to have appeared at all. At this moment, Yang Shilong and the other two finally recovered. Feng Xing seemed to be unwilling to give up as he took 2 steps forward and threw the folding fan in his hand towards where the flame hole was. The folding fan spun a few rounds in the air, but didn't find anything abnormal. The flame hole had completely disappeared. Feng Xing then retreated with a face full of resentment as he muttered to Yang Shilong, "Yang Ji, what realm is this person at? Why is he so powerful?" Hearing his question, I was curious as well, so I immediately pricked up my ears and prepared to listen to Yang Shilong's answer. Although he was defeated by Lin Aching in one move, Yang Shilong was still the strongest among us, so he definitely understood Lin Aching's strength better. But who knew that Yang Shilong would frown and think for a long time before saying, "His strength is hard to say. From what I feel, his strength should be at the initial stage of glory of consciousness." What? Initial stage of glory of consciousness? Isn't that about the same as Zhao Yongquan back then? How is that possible? Not only was I shocked, Feng Xing and the usually expressionless Lu Zheng also had faces full of astonishment. Lu Zheng subconsciously said, "That's impossible. Initial stage of glory of consciousness isn't even comparable to me. How could he defeat the 3 of us in one move?" Yang Shilong's frown deepened as he shook his head and said, "The power contained in that weird magic tool he used wasn't strong. It was indeed only at the initial stage of glory of consciousness. But that power was very strange. It didn't seem to be Tao energy, nor was it any yin and yang power. I've never seen it before." With that, Yang Shilong took a few steps forward and picked up the copper coin sword that had fallen to the ground. He held it in his hand and carefully examined it. After a long silence, he continued in a doubtful tone, "I've never seen this kind of power before. It's a little sinister, but it's not exactly the same. It seems to restrain the Tao Qi. The total amount of power is obviously not much, but it easily broke through my 9 coins magic sword." Not only that, after the 9 coin magic sword was damaged, I sent my chi of the way to the sore body, but I found that the sword body and my chi of the way did not seem to be compatible. His words startled me. The 9-coin magic sword was Yang Shilong's personal magical weapon. Although I hadn't created my own personal magical weapon, I knew that a geomancer had to spend many years to create it. There was no shortcut. Once it was successfully refined, the personal magic tool would be completely compatible with the Tao Chi of the Feng Shui master and become the exclusive magic tool of the Feng Shui master. No one else could take it away and use it. The reason why it had such a function was that the personal magic tool had been completely assimilated by the Tao Chi of the Feng Shui master. The Tao Chi of every Feng Shui master was different, just like how people's fingerprints are different. The personal magic tool was like a fingerprint lock added by the Feng Shui master. Except for the Feng Shui master, no one could open the lock. But now, the situation that Yang Shilong encountered was that after his personal magic weapon was broken by Lin Aching, he could not unlock it. It was unbelievable and completely overturned my previous understanding. Fang Xing and Lu Zheng were also surprised. Even Yang Shilong couldn't believe it. After saying that, he lowered his head and frowned, thinking. After a while, Yang Shilong concluded, this kind of power is too strange and overbearing. It's like the natural enemy of the Tao Chi. I've never seen it before. We must report it immediately. Besides, although we couldn't see anything wrong with the fire hole, it must be related to the true dragon vein since it appeared here. This is a big deal. We'd better leave this place and contact the headquarters first. Although we had brought communication equipment, there was a strong magnetic field near the true dragon vein. The communication equipment couldn't be used here. We could only get in touch with the outside world after we left this place. After Yang Shilong gave the order, the three of us didn't have any objections. We immediately went back to pack our things. When the sun rose, we set out on the road back. Yang Shilong and the others were full of confidence when they came here, but they didn't expect that it would end like this. Although they were middle-aged people who were shrewd, they couldn't help but be depressed on the way back. On the way back, Fang Xing and the others had tried to use communication equipment to contact the outside world. Unfortunately, there was no signal on their phones until they reached the Yellow Spring River. Even the satellite phone that Yang Shilong had brought with him couldn't be used. Fortunately, we had been calculating the time on the way back. When we arrived at the Yellow Spring River, it was the afternoon of October 14th. There were already corpses floating in the river. We just needed to wait until the floating corpse bridge appeared at night to cross the river. The way back had been smooth until now. As the old saying goes, blessings don't come in pairs, but misfortunes don't come alone. Right after that, something unexpected happened. The four of us rested on the riverbank for a while. When the floating corpse bridge appeared at night, we continued to cross the river. It was different from when we had come here. Today was the 15th of the month. The moon was bright, and it illuminated the floating corpses in the river. The white moonlight shone on the withered corpses' eye sockets, which looked much more terrifying than when we had come here. However, Yang Shilong and the others weren't ordinary people. They wouldn't be frightened by this kind of scene. I also had previous experience, so I wasn't really afraid. However, after the four of us had calmly stepped on the floating corpse bridge, a withered corpse suddenly stood up in the river. It rushed toward Fang Xing, who was walking in the front. Although I had told them that the dried corpses in the river could attack people, Fang Xing wasn't prepared since he hadn't encountered them on his way here, and he was in a hurry to leave. When the dried corpse attacked him, he instinctively used the folding fan magic tool he had been holding the whole time. Because he moved so fast, I didn't have time to react. The folding fan magical weapon carried abundant Tao energy and directly cut open the corpse's head. The corpse fell to the ground, but the Tao energy from the folding fan magical weapon scattered and splashed on the surrounding corpses. When a corpse breathed in Qi, it would become a shadow corpse. When it breathed in Tao energy, it would become a real zombie. Almost instantly, 4 black zombies appeared in the air and rushed toward Fang Xing, who was the closest to them. Yang Shilong reacted quickly and yelled, "Defend the enemy. Don't let the Tao energy touch the corpses." Fang Xing also reacted at this time. He put away the folding fan magic tool in his hand and replaced it with a vermilion talisman. He stretched out his hand and fixed the nearest black zombies on the spot. Yang Shilong had also arrived. He also used the talisman that prevented Dao Qi from spilling out to restrain the other two black zombies. After he was done, the last black zombie was also taken care of by Lu Zheng. From this, we could see the difference between Zhao Yongkuan and these people. They were all in the glory of consciousness realm, but Zhao Yongkuan had a hard time dealing with a black zombie. He had even used a paperweight magical weapon in the end. Now, not only Yang Shilong, but even Feng Xing and the others could easily deal with a black zombie. The sudden incident was quickly quelled, and everyone heaved a sigh of relief. Yang Shilong seemed to be dissatisfied with Feng Xing's previous performance and specially reminded him to be careful. Just as we were preparing to continue our journey, all the corpses on the river's surface suddenly started to float up and down. The river water also started to sway. Yang Shilong and the others looked at the river strangely. They didn't know what was happening, but I instantly reacted. A layer of sweat appeared on my forehead. I shouted at them, "That golden head is coming out." After shouting, I immediately ran for my life to the other side of the river. As for Yang Shilong and the others, they had already heard about how terrifying the black head was. The moment they heard me, they immediately sprinted toward the other side of the river. Although my physical fitness wasn't bad, I hadn't passed the dragon luring stage. I hadn't received the complete baptism of the dragon energy, so there was still a gap between me and Yang Shilong and the others. Not long later, Yang Shilong and the other two overtook me. They were almost at the other side of the river, but I was still in the middle of the river. Just at this moment, the corpses in the river suddenly flew into the air. I lowered my head and saw that a smear of gold had already appeared in the river. Chapter 99. The golden head was about to appear, and I was still 20 meters away from the riverbank. I couldn't escape. Moreover, when I saw that gold light, my chest felt like it was hit by a hammer. I felt dizzy, and my body went soft. I didn't have the strength to run away, so I fell on my butt on a dried corpse. At this moment, I couldn't help but remember a joke I had heard before. It said that when you met a bear in the forest, it didn't matter if you ran faster than the bear. What mattered was that you ran faster than your companions. Now that I thought about it, it was true. Yang Shilong and the others ran faster than me. That was why they ran away while I was left behind. I closed my eyes and recalled the terrifying appearance of the golden head I had seen the last time. I didn't have any hope for what would happen next. The golden light became thicker, and the last dried corpses on the riverbank flew up, including the corpse I was sitting on. My body tilted, and I fell into the water. The river was very cold. After I fell, I felt the cold water, and my dizzy mind became clear. Even if the golden head was unimaginably terrifying, I didn't want to die. I wanted to live. The resolute conviction in my mind suddenly returned. I did my utmost to stabilize my body. I didn't care about the consequences of carelessly activating the Tao energy. I took out my magic compass and urged the spirit snake to appear to help me. At the same time, I took out the Mao Shi talisman and prepared to receive the Tao energy. However, after doing all of that, I found that the snake spirit didn't respond to my call. It didn't appear, and the Tao energy around seemed to be isolated. I took out the talisman, but I couldn't receive the Tao energy. I couldn't activate the talisman. Without the support of the Tao energy, I wasn't much better than an ordinary person. In this cold river, I couldn't even keep floating. My body kept sinking. Eventually, I sank into the water. Instinctively, I opened my mouth to breathe, but I got swallowed by a mouthful of water. I almost suffocated. I tried my best to grab the water, but I couldn't grab anything. My legs tried to move, but I couldn't float. Instead, I kept sinking. I couldn't breathe. My vision turned dark, and I couldn't see anything. My consciousness was about to disappear. At this moment, my feet seemed to touch the bottom of the river. I stood up straight. Didn't they say that this river was 100 meters deep? Have I sunk to the bottom of the river? Before I could react, my body was pushed upward by an irresistible force. After a while, my head popped out of the water. I couldn't help but open my mouth to take a deep breath. However, after taking a breath, he started coughing violently again and spat out mouthful after mouthful of water. After I spat a few mouthfuls of water, I found that I had returned to the surface of the river. What was going on? Did the river dry up by itself? While I was still surprised, I suddenly saw a thick golden light around me. Instinctively, I lowered my head and was dumbstruck. It wasn't that the river had dried up, but the golden head at the bottom of the river had risen from under my feet and pushed me out of the river. In other words, I'm standing on top of that golden head. I was so scared that my scalp was about to explode. The golden head was so terrifying, and I was actually standing on it. Originally, I thought that I had managed to escape from death's door. But now, it seems that I'm going to die even more miserably. My face paled and I didn't dare to move. I didn't even dare to lower my head to look at the golden head. I was so scared that I was waiting for its revenge. However, it was strange that even though I had waited for a long time, I didn't get the revenge that I had imagined. My surroundings were completely silent. When I opened my eyes, I found that my body wasn't still. I was slowly drifting toward the riverbank. Moreover, the golden head's countless hairs had parted into two halves around me, leaving only a small space for me to stand on. Why is the golden head drifting toward the riverbank? Why isn't it hurting me? Did it come out of the river to help me cross the river? It wasn't a coincidence that it pushed me out of the river. Did it purposely save me? As soon as this thought popped up in my head, I denied it immediately. Are you kidding me? I just glanced at the golden head from a distance, and I couldn't bear its pressure. How strong is it? How could it come out of the river to help me cross the river? Before I could figure it out, the golden head had brought me to the riverbank. At first, I didn't dare to move. However, after waiting for a long time and seeing that nothing dangerous had happened, I cautiously tried to stand up. After I stood up, I saw Yang Shilong and the other two standing not far from the riverbank. All of them wore a strange expression as they looked at me blankly. I slowly lifted my legs and moved my body. The golden head was still standing there. It was as quiet as a boat. At this moment, I finally calmed down. However, I didn't dare to move too much. I slowly took small steps and walked down from the golden head's head to the riverbank. When Yang Shilong and the other two saw my movement from afar, their anxious expressions relaxed a little. Instead, they became curious. The three of them discussed for a while before slowly walking toward me. When they came to me, I had already walked down from the golden head. I stood on the riverbank and turned to look at the golden head. When I had seen it before, it was either from afar or standing on its head, so I couldn't tell how big it was. But now I could clearly see that the head was as big as an excavator. However, its facial features were exactly the same as an ordinary person's. I could even see its expression in between its eyebrows. However, the strange thing was that the facial features on the head looked like that of a child. Its eyes were pure and innocent, and the corners of its mouth were slightly lifted, giving it a flattering smile. I suddenly had an unimaginable thought. Although the golden head looked terrifying, it could be just a child. Every time it came out of the river, it was just to help people cross the river. However, because of its terrifying appearance and power, people were scared shitless and didn't give it a chance to cross the river. Although I also thought that this thought was absurd, when I looked at its face from a close distance, the fear in my heart slowly disappeared. I didn't think that the head was terrifying anymore. Instead, I thought that it was cute. With that thought in mind, I subconsciously extended my hand and touched the forehead of the golden head. When it saw my action, its expression didn't change. It still wore a flattering smile, and it even moved its forehead closer to me. It looked very obedient. I heaved a sigh of relief and gently stroked his forehead. At this moment, Yang Shilong and the other two walked next to me. Feng Xing looked at my action and couldn't help but exclaim in disbelief. Creation is so magical. Such a terrifying thing has a kind heart, and it even knows how to save people. It's so strange. As he said that, he imitated my action and extended his hand to touch the forehead of the golden head. However, right at this moment, the expression on the golden head's face suddenly changed. Its eyes slightly arched, and the corners of its mouth that had been curled up suddenly dropped. The flattering smile on its face disappeared, and one of the strands of hair that was connected to the countless corpses on its head suddenly drooped down. Together with the corpses, it whizzed toward Feng Xing. No one could react to the sudden change. When a strand of hair that was connected to the corpses was about to hit Feng Xing, his hand was still in midair. However, in the next second, the thick strand of hair whizzed past, and Feng Xing's body was directly divided into two parts. The upper part was thrown into the river, while the lower part was still standing upright. After a while, it fell heavily on the ground. Feng Xing's action seemed to have enraged the Golden Head. After killing Feng Xing, a few more strands of hair whizzed toward Yang Shilong and the other two. Their reactions were much faster than Feng Xing's. After noticing the signs, they turned around and ran. However, the speed at which the Golden Head's hair was swinging was much faster than theirs. In just a blink of an eye, it had reached them and reached them. Fortunately, after running for a few steps, they were far away from the Golden Head. Its hair didn't hit them, but the dried corpse at the top of the hair hit their shoulders and sent them flying. They lay on the ground and struggled for a long time, but they couldn't get up. The fear that had vanished from my face reappeared. In just 1 or 2 seconds, out of the 3 people that had traveled with me for a few days, 1 was dead and 2 were injured. This Golden Head was really scary. It wasn't as cute as I had imagined. Chapter 100. What's going on? The Golden Head didn't show any mercy to Feng Xing and the others, but it was trying to please me. Could it know me? Although I had seen the Golden Head once more than Feng Xing and the others, I had only seen it from afar. It was impossible for me to know it. There must be some other reason that I didn't know. Could it be because of the jade bracelet? I was suspicious, but Yang Shilong and Lu Zheng had already climbed up from the riverbank and were peeking in my direction. I didn't dare to take out the jade bracelet to check, so I could only hide my doubts. At that moment, the Golden Head moved its forehead closer to me. I thought for a while and extended my hand to touch it. As expected, it didn't resist my touch at all. Instead, it narrowed its eyes and seemed to be enjoying it. I suddenly thought of something. Since the Golden Head was so close to me and it was so powerful, if it could follow me like Tong Tong, wouldn't I be invincible? Yang Shilong, who was at the peak of the Earthmaster level, wouldn't be able to last even a second under the Golden Head's attack. This Golden Head was probably even more powerful than the Heavenly Master. With that thought, my heart thumped hard. I swallowed my saliva and asked the Golden Head, "Are you willing to come with me?" Since it was so powerful, it should be able to understand human language. After asking that question, I held my breath and waited for its reply. Who knew that I would be wrong this time? The Golden Head didn't react to my question at all. It still looked at me with an adorable expression, its huge mouth smiling foolishly at me. I couldn't help but feel discouraged. This fellow didn't seem to understand human language. Moreover, its body was so huge. It wasn't like Tong Tong's illusory body that could hide in the jade bracelet. If he were to follow me, it would be a troublesome matter. After getting rid of the unrealistic thoughts in my head, I extended my hand and rubbed the Golden Head's forehead. I smiled and said to it, "Xiao Jin, you should go back. I'm going to leave soon. I'll come and play with you again when I have time." After saying that, I waved at it and pretended to get up to leave. This time, the Golden Head seemed to understand. Its huge head retreated a little. It looked like it was going to return to the river. However, right at this moment, a shadow suddenly swung down from the top of its head. My heart chilled. Feng Xing's body wasn't far from me. Was my assumption wrong? Was the Golden Head going to attack me again? Cold sweat instantly appeared on my forehead. I tried my best to run away, but the Golden Head was too fast. Before I could do anything, the shadow was already in front of me. However, it was different from what I had imagined. The shadow didn't hit me, but stopped in front of me. This thick strand of hair didn't have a corpse attached to it. Instead, a green bead the size of an egg was wrapped around it. It floated quietly in front of me. I was stunned for a moment before I reacted. I asked the Golden Head, "Is this for me?" The Golden Head still didn't react, but it still didn't take back the pillar. I turned to look behind me. Yang Shilong and the others were standing behind me. Their line of sight was blocked by my body. Moreover, the golden head was emitting a golden light. The green bead wasn't obvious in the golden light. Yang Shilong and the others shouldn't be able to see it. I carefully extended my hand and tried to use my body to block the movement as I received the green bead. I received the green bead and put it in my pocket. The golden head finally turned around. Its body moved slightly and quickly returned to the center of the river. It glanced at me one last time before slowly sinking into the river. After the golden light disappeared, the flying corpses in the air also fell into the river. Some of them floated downstream, while the others sank to the bottom of the river. The river bank gradually calmed down. After a long while, Yang Shilong and Lu Zhengkai returned from afar. Their faces were still filled with fear. After taking a few glances at the riverbank, Yang Shilong asked me, still in a state of shock, "That thing left?" I nodded, but didn't say anything. Yang Shilong gently exhaled. Then he asked, "What was that thing? Why was it so kind to you, but directly tried to kill us?" I shook my head and smiled wryly. "I don't know. I only saw it from afar last time. I was almost scared to death when it knocked me out of the river. I thought that I was dead for sure. Who knew that it would end up like this?" Although Yang Shilong and the others found it strange, they obviously didn't think that I would be related to such a terrifying existence. In the end, they could only conclude that this terrifying golden head was temperamental and acted strangely, leaving no traces behind. After chatting for a while, Yang Shilong walked next to the lower half of Fangxing's body. He stayed silent for a long time before sighing. He turned to the two of us and said, "The upper half of the body fell into the river and can't be found anymore. Let's bury this body first. After we go back and inform his family, we'll find someone to retrieve the body." Since Yang Shilong said so, Lu Zheng and I naturally didn't have any objections. We found a place with soft soil not far from the riverbank and started to dig a hole. At this moment, Yang Shilong and Lu Zheng still had bloodstains on the corners of their mouths. Yang Shilong's left arm was twisted at a strange angle. It looked like it was completely broken. Although the mysterious accumulating curse could adjust the body's condition and suppress the injuries for a short time, it wasn't a miraculous medicine. It couldn't completely heal the injured body. Since the two of them were injured, the task of digging the hole was naturally given to me. I want to find a thick tree branch. After digging for half a day, I was exhausted and could only dig a small hole. I had heard that when a geomancy master reached the glorious knowledge realm, they could recognize the power of the 5 elements and create talismans of the 5 elements. Among them, the earth talismans could easily change the soil, so digging a hole was a piece of cake. Unfortunately, I hadn't reached that level yet. In the end, I could only take out 2 fierce yang talismans and use my Tao energy to guide them. A large amount of violent yang energy exploded on the ground, creating a 1-meter-wide pit. Only then did I bury Fangxing's corpse. After filling the hole, Yang Shilong went to find a few stones and placed the 6 divine lines on them as a sign. After everything was done, Yang Shilong didn't want to linger. He called me and Lu Zheng to continue our journey through the night. Since it was the 15th of the month, the moonlight was bright after midnight. It wasn't too difficult to travel at night. However, Yang Shilong and Lu Zheng were injured, which affected their speed. After leaving the Yellow Spring River, we walked for around 7 or 8 hours. It was around noon when we finally returned to the Shenangjia scenic area. When we arrived at the scenic area, our phone signal was restored. Yang Shilong quickly reported the situation to the headquarters. He didn't seem to be in a hurry. He didn't urge us to leave. Instead, he arranged for Lu Zheng and me to stay in the hotel to rest. Although I didn't encounter any danger along the way, I was exhausted. When we returned to the hotel room, I slept until nightfall. When I got up, Yang Shilong and the others didn't come to find me. I didn't go out. I sat on the bed and took out the green bead that the golden head had given me. I started to study it. This bead was as big as an egg. It was green, but it wasn't the same as the bright green jade. It was a pale green that didn't make people feel comfortable. I took the bead and gently knocked on the wall. The sound wasn't clear. It didn't look like glass or jade. It felt like plastic. It wasn't soft or hard. It was really strange. After studying it for a long time, I couldn't recognize what this bead was. I didn't know why the golden head had given me such a thing. Feeling helpless, I had to put the bead away. I would deal with it later. After putting the bead away, I took out the jade bracelet. After absorbing part of the dragon vein's energy from the jade bracelet, it had been stabilized for a few days. The dragon energy had turned into my Tao energy. Now, I could absorb it for the second time. Since the Tao energy in my body was close to the gathering chi as a pillar realm, it would be best for me to wait until I went to the Metaphysics Society's headquarters to observe the true dragon vein. Then, I would break through to the dragon summoning realm. However, after reading the words on the red handkerchief, I became more anxious to increase my power. Although I wasn't sure if the red shadow had sent me a message or if I had interpreted it correctly, it was still a thought. I closed my eyes and calmly absorbed the dragon energy from the jade bracelet as I looked forward to the bright future. In just a few minutes, I felt that the dragon energy in my body had reached an exaggerated level. It was very difficult to absorb anymore. I stopped and retrieved the jade bracelet. Then I sat cross-legged on the bed and started to stabilize the dragon energy in my body. After half a night, the Tao energy in my body was so abundant that I could reach the gathering chi as a pillar realm. At this moment, I had only digested half of the dragon energy I had absorbed. After thinking for a while, I didn't dare to break through to the dragon summoning realm. I tried my best to suppress the absorption of the dragon energy in my body. I wanted to disperse the excess dragon energy. However, the Tao energy in my body seemed to have a mind of its own. It greedily absorbed the dragon energy. Chapter 101. After reaching the realm of guiding chi like a pillar, the Tao chi in the body would surge out and cleanse the body, greatly increasing the physique of the feng shui master. At the same time, the Tao Chi would enter the meridians of the body and charge the 8 meridians, opening the acupoints, allowing the feng shui master to enter the second stage of Earth Master, pressure point realm. Since most of the Tao Chi in the feng shui master's body was formed from dragon chi, this process was also called dragon chi baptism. The process of dragon chi baptism was very important to feng shui masters because the 8 meridians were different. Opening different acupoints would bring different improvements to the feng shui master. At the same time, opening these acupoints would indicate which step the feng shui master could reach in the future. So, I had to be careful. I stopped what I was doing and sat on the bed, thinking about how to proceed with dragon chi baptism. The 8 meridians were the general name for the Ren meridian, Du meridian, Chong meridian, Dai meridian, Yin heel meridian, Yang heel meridian, Yin linking meridian, and Yang linking meridian. On each meridian, there were dozens of acupoints. Some feng shui masters with mediocre talent could only open 1 or 2 acupoints after going through the dragon chi baptism. Although they had reached the pressure point realm, they were much weaker than people of the same level. They might not even be that much stronger than feng shui masters of the dragon drawing realm. Wanting to go one step further and reach the glory of knowledge realm was basically wishful thinking. Normal feng shui masters could normally open half of the acupoints in one of the 8 meridians, about 5 or 6. Feng shui masters who had reached the pressure point realm were strong and could completely crush feng shui masters of the dragon-seeking realm. Moreover, after hard work, they might even have a chance to reach the glory of knowledge realm. The 2 above were normal feng shui masters. Very few talented feng shui masters could open a complete meridian during the dragon chi baptism and enter the pressure point realm. This kind of feng shui master could completely crush people of the same level. After a few more years of hard work, they would quickly enter the glory of knowledge realm. There is even a small possibility of them reaching the legendary heavenly master realm, because there were very few feng shui masters who opened a complete meridian There was even a special name for them in the metaphysics world. They were called one meridian geomaster. Any geomaster of one vein would be highly sought after by the famous sects of the profound world. As long as they were willing to join, these sects would provide for their cultivation needs. Unlike a feng shui master like me, who can only run businesses to earn money to buy all kinds of things needed for cultivation. Of course, these large sects were not doing a losing business. As long as they provided for them for a few years, these earthly masters of one vein would advance to the glorious knowledge stage. Their strength would be very strong, and they would become the pillars of these sections. Some of them could even attempt to break through to the heavenly master realm. Once a heavenly master appeared, it was an absolute glory for a sect. Just like how a true dragon's vein could ensure that a sect could be passed down through the ages, a celestial master could do the same. Other than a vein of earth masters, it was said that some exceptional geniuses could even open 2 complete meridians after undergoing the baptism of the dragon chi. These absolute geniuses were known as double-vein geomasters. Their talent was limitless. As for some of the feng shui masters who had opened 3 or even 4 meridians, almost all of them were great figures in history. For example, Zhang Daoling of Longhu Mountain was said to have opened 4 meridians. There was also Qiu Chuji, the eternal spring sage, who was said to have opened 3 meridians. These existences were as rare as phoenix feathers and unicorn horns. They had almost no reference value, so I didn't dare to think too much about it. I just hoped that I could open a complete meridian and be satisfied. Although I was looking forward to knowing how many meridians I could open, I had just reached the drawing chi like a pillar realm. It was not suitable for me to undergo the baptism of the dragon chi immediately. I sat on the bed and rested for a while. Since I had nothing to do, I might as well convert the remaining dragon chi in my body into Tao Chi and absorb it. However, after absorbing it, I could not help but smile bitterly. After my Tao Chi reached the drawing chi like a pillar realm, it was not that I could not absorb dragon chi anymore. It was just that the efficiency of absorbing dragon chi was too low. Previously, the same amount of dragon chi could be converted into Tao Chi at a 1-to-1 rate. However, now, the conversion rate was not even 10-to-1. Even after absorbing the remaining dragon chi in my body, I could not feel the increase in Tao Chi. Everyone knew that the more Tao Chi stored in one's body during the drawing dragon chi, the more meridians one would open during the baptism of the dragon chi. Normally, everyone should try their best to increase their Tao Chi reserves during the drawing dragon chi stage. It would be best if they could draw chi like a sea, let alone draw chi like a pillar. However, in reality, this was not practical. Once the limit of drawing chi like a pillar was exceeded, the conversion rate would be less than 10-to-1 if I continued to absorb dragon chi like I was doing now. It would take an unlimited amount of energy and time to increase the Tao Chi by a little. In this way, the loss outweighed the gain. The truly talented feng shui masters wouldn't care about this. Only those with poor talent would use this method to improve their chances of winning the dragon chi baptism in the future. However, such feng shui masters usually lost everything in the end and couldn't improve their chances of winning the dragon chi baptism. However, my current situation was different. There was still excess dragon chi in the jade bracelet. It would be a waste if I did not absorb it. Originally, I wanted to absorb all the dragon chi in the jade bracelet. However, after I absorbed the dragon chi in my body, the Tao Chi became unstable again. I needed a period of nourishment before I could absorb it again. Looking at the remaining dragon chi in the jade bracelet, I had to give up for now. At this moment, the sky was still bright. Light shone in through the gaps of the curtains, making the room seem even darker. I stretched and jumped off the bed. Although I did not sleep for the entire night, the Tao Chi in my body increased. I was at my peak. I walked over to open the curtains and let the sunlight shine on my body. I felt my body brimming with energy. The next step was to find a suitable opportunity to undergo the baptism of the dragon chi. Then, I would be able to officially enter the realm of pressure point. After that, I would work hard to enter the realm of glorious knowledge. Then, the red shadow would keep his promise and appear in front of me again, right? Thinking about this, I couldn't help but smile. At this moment, there was a sudden knock on the door. I was stunned. Yesterday, Yang Shilong said that he was going to rest here for 2 days. Why'd he come to find me so early today? I walked over to open the door. What appeared in front of me was neither Yang Shilong nor Lu Zhang. It was a tall beauty in casual clothes. I was stunned for a moment before asking, "Who are you looking for?" This woman looked to be around the same age as me. She was very beautiful, but her lips were thin and her face was expressionless. She looked very cold. Even after hearing my question, she didn't open her mouth to speak and only stared at me. I didn't understand. Even if she was a beauty, wasn't it rude of her to suddenly knock on my door and stare at me without saying a word? Just as I was about to ask again, a cough came from behind the woman. Yang Shilong suddenly walked out with a rare smile on his face. He pointed at the young beauty and said to me, "This is our Metaphysics Association's Miss Yi Piampian. She has the same position as me, a vice president. Miss Yi just rushed over from the headquarters this morning to take over my responsibility for the investigation of the True Dragon vein." I was stunned. Such a young lady was actually the vice president of the Metaphysics Association like Yang Shilong. Moreover, from the way Yang Shilong spoke, it was obvious that he was trying to please this young lady. This scene made my eyes widen. However, what made my heart flutter wasn't this, but the lady's name. Yi Piampian. I couldn't help but recall the line of words on the red handkerchief. Black dragon Chilan not Piampian, farewell. I didn't understand the 2 lines at all. Could it be related to the name of this lady in front of me? Chapter 102. I nodded absent-mindedly and lifted my head to look at Yi Piampian. I tried to find any connection between her and the red shadow or me. However, after looking at her for a long time, I couldn't find anything except that I had never seen her before. To an unfamiliar girl, my gaze was rather abrupt. However, Yi Piampian didn't seem to mind at all. Her expression didn't even change. She continued to ask in an icy voice, "Tell me about how you discovered the true dragon's vein. Don't leave out any details." I was stunned and didn't reply to her. I turned to look at Yang Shilong. I had already told Yang Shilong about the true dragon vein. Moreover, he must have reported it to the Metaphysics Association's headquarters. Since this woman was sent here, she must know about it. Why did she want me to repeat it? It was obvious that she didn't trust Yang Shilong. It was normal for her to not trust others, but she didn't give face to Yang Shilong, who was also the vice president of the Metaphysics Association. I thought that Yang Shilong would be angry or at least unhappy. However, when I turned to look at him, Yang Shilong smiled wryly and gestured for me to repeat the story to Yi Piampian. I smiled and opened the door for them to sit down. Then, I repeated what I had told Yang Shilong to Yi Piampian. After I finished, Yi Piampian frowned and didn't say anything. She seemed to be thinking about something. The experience that I told her was naturally made up, but I wasn't just making it up. It was probably something that I personally experienced last time, but I hid the last part. I only mentioned the true dragon vein and didn't mention the fire god temple. Seeing that she didn't say anything, I stood up and made 2 cups of tea from the hotel. When I returned, Yi Piampian lifted her head to look me in the eyes. According to what you said, the mountain range where the true dragon vein is located is really huge. You were there at that time. Didn't you notice that such a huge mountain range disappeared? Yes. I had already prepared myself to answer her question. I nodded and placed the cup in front of her. You didn't notice any signs beforehand? Yi Piampian continued to ask. I shook my head again. No. Yi Piampian suddenly frowned and said, "You're lying. It was such a huge mountain range, and it was a true dragon vein. Even a heavenly master would not be able to easily make it disappear into thin air. At the very least, a concealment formation would have to be set up beforehand. I can understand if you say that you didn't notice it at the time, but if you say that you didn't notice any signs beforehand, that's impossible." I already knew that she wouldn't say anything nice when she asked me to repeat myself, but I didn't mind. I spread my hands and said, I'm not sure if Heavenly Master can do it, but I really didn't discover anything at that time. Vice President Yang and the others are stronger than me, and they've also gone to the site to take a look. You can ask them if they discovered anything. After I said that, Yang Shilong replied awkwardly. I could only feel that the true dragon's vein was right in front of me. However, I couldn't find any signs of it being hidden. Ypiampian was unmoved. She shook her head and said, It's normal that it's hard to find out now, because the concealing formation has been activated. But before the concealing formation was activated, there must have been something wrong. You didn't tell me. This time, I was a little angry. How could such a beautiful girl be so obstinate and self-opinionated? She didn't even discuss with me and immediately accused me of lying. My expression also turned cold. I said to Yi Pian, the reason why I told you about the true dragon's vein was because I wanted to make a contribution to the Metaphysics Association. Does Miss Yi think that it's my duty? If I knew that Miss Yi would interrogate me like this, I wouldn't have told you about it. Seeing that I was angry, Yang Shilong smiled and tried to smooth things over. Miss Yi is too concerned. Xiaozhou, don't take it to heart. Miss Yi, don't be too anxious. Let's think of another way. I had to give face to Yang Shilong. Just as I was about to get out of this situation, who knew that Ypiampian would shake her head expressionlessly. I'm not concerned. He definitely didn't tell the truth. I was so angry that I was amused. I simply told her, that's all I know. Miss Yi, it's up to you whether you believe me or not. Anyway, I have nothing else to say. Yang Shilong smiled helplessly and awkwardly on the side. Ypiampian was still indifferent. She stood up from the chair and raised her feet as if she was about to leave. However, after taking 2 steps, she turned to look at me and said, I'll go to the site to check it out. If I find that you're lying, I'll come to find you again. With that, she walked out of the room without hesitation. I curled my lips and didn't want to talk to her anymore. However, when I recalled the horrors of the underworld river and the Valley of Ghosts, I couldn't help but remind her, if you want to go, you'd better ask Uncle Yang to accompany you. It won't be an easy journey. Hearing that, Ypiampian stopped and turned to look at me strangely. Then, she said seriously, I'll be responsible for my own safety. Then, she didn't bother with me anymore and left on her own. I was so angry that I almost slapped my mouth. That woman was so arrogant that her eyes were staring at the sky. Why did I say that? After Ypiampian left, Yang Shilong awkwardly explained to me that Ypiampian was a straightforward person and that her words would offend people easily. He asked me not to mind her and said that she was a good girl. Except for her beauty, I didn't find anything good about her. Of course, I didn't tell Yang Shilong about it. I just said a few words to him and sent him out of the room. I had been to Shenangjia twice, but I hadn't seen the scenery in the scenic area since I was in a hurry. I finally had time this time. After breakfast in the morning, I wandered around. After walking around and spending a lot of money on admission tickets, I didn't see much good scenery. I didn't know if it was an occupational disease of feng shui master, but when I looked at the scenery, I first looked at the spiritual energy in feng shui. It wasn't that the scenery here wasn't beautiful, but the spiritual energy in the artificially developed scenery was very weak. It couldn't be compared to the Xiaopuan Gorge on the other side of the Yellow Spring River. When I returned to the hotel in the afternoon, Yang Shilong came to see me again. I then learned that Ypiampian had left for the Fire God Temple at noon. Since this woman could become the Vice Guild leader, there was no need to doubt her strength. However, it was too arrogant of her to travel alone. Who knew what would happen in the Yellow Spring River or the Ghost Valley? It would be a pity if such a beautiful woman died there. After telling me about Ypiampian, Yang Shilong said that he was going to return to the Metaphysics Society's headquarters that night. He also asked me to return to Shenzhen as soon as possible. Last time, President Su told me that after the Dragon Season competition's list was confirmed, we would gather and head to the Metaphysics Society's headquarters in about a month. It should be around 1 or 2 weeks. After Yang Shilong and the others left in the evening, I went to the train station to buy a ticket and rushed back to Shenzhen. It was already the next morning when I returned to Shenzhen. I carried my luggage and returned to the hotel that Wang Yongjun had booked for me. Before I reached my room, I bumped into Dainan Zhou. As soon as he saw me, he ran over and punched me. He said with hidden bitterness, "You're finally back. I've been looking for you several times." I was surprised. "Why are you looking for me? It's not like you don't know my phone number. Can't you just call me if you need anything? If I could get through to you, I wouldn't have to run back and forth. I've been trying to call you since the day before yesterday, but I couldn't get through." Now that he mentioned it, I remembered that when I returned from the Fire God Temple, I fell into the Yellow Spring River. My phone couldn't be used after it was soaked in the water, but I didn't care about it. I awkwardly changed the topic. "What happened?" Dainan Zhou hurriedly told me that something had happened to his girlfriend at school, and he wanted me to help her. Girlfriend? School? After I asked him for a while, he told me that he had a new girlfriend this year. Her name was Zhou Shi, and she was a third-year student at a local school in Shenzhen. His girlfriend, Zhou Shi, had a close friend called Lin Yuetong. The two of them lived in the same dormitory. In the early hours of the day before yesterday, she was sleeping in the dormitory when she was suddenly woken up. She heard Lin Yuetong barking from the lower berth. Chapter 103. Barking like a dog? As soon as Dainan Zhou said that, I furrowed my brows. If a person barked like a dog, they either had a mental problem or were possessed by a dog. There were often legends about cats and dogs possessing a person, but in reality, it was almost impossible for such a thing to happen. Animals were different from humans. Humans had 3 souls, and after they died, they would form a yin soul. Animals only had 2 souls, and ordinary animals couldn't form a yin soul. Only the snake's spirit, which had cultivated successfully when it was alive, could create a natal soul. After it died, its consciousness wouldn't scatter and it would form a spirit. Moreover, the cultivation of animals required the accumulation of countless years. Species with short lifespans like cats and dogs had almost no possibility of cultivating a natal soul. Only long-lived species like snakes and turtles had a higher possibility of cultivating a natal soul. In addition, some creatures like foxes and yellow-skinned animals that were born with a trace of natal soul chi also had a higher probability of cultivating a natal soul. After pondering for a while, I shook my head at Dainan Zhou. Don't think of everything in a strange way. Barking like a dog is most likely a mental problem. Just send him to the hospital for treatment. Why did you come to see me? Ever since he was in university, he had always been a noisy person. Moreover, he was very interested in metaphysics. He liked to ask about strange things and make wild guesses. After listening to me, Dainan Zhou became anxious. He said, "No, it's not that simple. My girlfriend is outside the hotel. Put down your luggage and we'll go there. I'll ask Zhou Shi to tell you." Although I didn't think much of it, I still went to put down my luggage and followed Dainan Zhou to the hotel's underground parking lot. His girlfriend was in his car. When I saw Zhou Shi in the car, my eyes brightened. This girl was more than 7 meters tall. She was fair and slender, and her facial features were exquisite. She looked like a celebrity. Dainan Zhou was lucky to have found such a beautiful girlfriend. After Dainan Zhou introduced us to each other with a smile, Zhou Shi generously reached out his hand from the front seat and shook my hand. Then he said to me with a face full of curiosity, "Nanzhou always talks about how his buddy Zhou he was like in university. I've been rubbing it so much that calluses are about to form in my ears. I've always wanted him to introduce me to him, but who knew that after such a long time, there wouldn't be a suitable opportunity. We only met today." I smiled and chatted with her. I wanted to ask her about Lin Yuetong, but Zhou Shi didn't seem to be in a hurry. He asked me, "I heard from Nanzhou that you had a female classmate in your university. She saw a little girl's soul in the toilet of the dormitory. She told me that it was really scary. She also said that you were the one who solved it. Is that true?" I was stunned and turned to look at Dainan Zhou, who was sitting in the driver's seat. I was a little unhappy. Why didn't this guy watch his mouth? Why did he say everything to others? Dainan Zhou seemed to notice that I wasn't happy. He explained awkwardly, "Zhou Shi likes ghost stories." I used to tell her ghost stories to trick her. After the two flirted for a while, she asked me about Suziyu. I didn't want to talk about it, so I casually answered her. Fortunately, I didn't hear Suziyu's name for what she said. Dainan Zhou probably didn't tell her. This guy still had some sense and wasn't blinded by love. Fortunately, I didn't hear Suziyu's name from her words. It was likely that Dainan Zhou didn't tell him. That fellow was still rational and hadn't been blinded by love. Suziyu has become a famous celebrity ever since she participated in a talent show in university. I occasionally hear about her on the news. As a public figure, if what happened back then were to be exposed, it would definitely affect Suziyu's future. That's why I was unhappy just now. After getting out of the car, I found out that Zhou Shi's university was an art university. No wonder she looked like a celebrity and behaved naturally. It turned out that she was studying at a celebrity preparatory school. It was no wonder why she looked like a celebrity and behaved naturally. It turned out she was studying at a celebrity preparatory school. I turned to look at Zhou Shi's face. I didn't know much about physiognomy, but I could tell at a glance that Zhou Shi's Falu Palace wasn't a good place. Even if she had some achievements in her career, she wouldn't be able to achieve much. In other words, she couldn't become a superstar. Anyway, it was good. Dainan Zhou seemed to be obsessed with her. If she couldn't become a superstar, the two of them could continue their relationship. If she became a superstar, Dainan Zhou would have a tragic ending. On the way to the university, Zhou Shi's face turned gloomy. He told me about Lin Yuedong's situation. It was just as Dainan Zhou had said. Lin Yuedong suddenly started barking like a dog in the middle of the night. She looked sluggish and didn't recognize anyone. Zhou Shi knew that something was wrong. He hurriedly called Lin Yuedong's mother. After anxiously explaining the situation, Lin Yuedong's mother was very calm. It was as if she had already known about this. She directly told Zhou Shi not to contact the hospital. Then, she asked him to pass the phone to Lin Yuedong. Zhou Shi didn't understand, so he put the phone in Lin Yuedong's ear. However, Lin Yuedong was very resistant. She struggled and barked like a dog while using her hand to call the other side of the phone. Zhou Shi talked to Lin Yuedong's mother. Lin Yuedong's mother told him not to worry about Lin Yuedong and to force her to listen to the phone. Then, the girls in Zhou Shi's dormitory grabbed Lin Yuedong's arms and legs and tied her up. Then, Zhou Shi put the phone in Lin Yuedong's ear. No one knew what Lin Yuedong's mother said on the phone, but after a few minutes, Lin Yuedong finally stopped barking like a dog. Instead, she began to wail loudly, but there were no tears on her face. She just kept letting out hysterical and uncontrollable cries. This time, Zhou Shi didn't know what to do. He braced himself and continued to put the phone in Lin Yuedong's ear. This situation lasted for more than 20 minutes. Lin Yuedong finally stopped. She stopped barking and quietly curled up on the bed. Her body twitched from time to time. Zhou Shi heaved a sigh of relief. He took the phone back and listened to it. Lin Yuedong's mother's voice was very strange. She kept chanting something that sounded like Buddhist scriptures. After Zhou, she said that Lin Yuedong's condition had temporarily stabilized. Lin Yuedong's mother asked her to take care of her. Then, she said that she would think of a solution and hung up. After that, Lin Yuedong lay on the bed and gradually fainted. There was no news from Lin Yuedong's mother. When the sun rose, Zhou Shi called Lin Yuedong's mother again. However, no one answered. The girls in the dormitory discussed for a while. They wanted to send Lin Yuedong to the hospital first. However, Zhou Shi remembered what Lin Yuedong's mother said and insisted on not sending her to the hospital. Then he contacted Dainan Zhou. In the next 2 days, Lin Yuedong was in a coma. He couldn't get through to her home phone. Dainan Zhou's team couldn't find me either. Both of them were in a terrible situation. After listening to Zhou Shi's explanation, I became serious. It seemed things weren't as simple as I had thought. Although Buddhists weren't the same as geomancy masters, they were still orthodox. Buddhist scriptures had a strong power to expel evil spirits. According to Zhou Shi, Lin Yuedong's mother's chanting of Buddhist scriptures could calm her down. It proved that Lin Yuedong's strange behavior wasn't as simple as a mental problem. As for the specific situation, I couldn't tell until I saw her in person. I needed to observe her face to be sure. I didn't ask further and followed she to her dormitory. I thought that it wouldn't be easy to enter the female dormitory. However, Shi's school seemed to have a loose management system. Dinan and I followed her. No one came out to manage the dormitory. When we arrived at the dormitory, I observed the place before entering. There was no energy in the room. It looked normal. I saw Lin Yuedong. It was just as she had said. She was lying on the bed, still unconscious. Her breathing was weak, and her body would convulse every half a minute. I observed Lin Yuedong for quite a long time. Except for her weak soul, everything else was normal. I didn't see anything strange. While I was puzzled, I saw a tiny red dot between Lin Yuedong's eyebrows. If I didn't look carefully, I wouldn't have noticed it. It looked like a small needle had poked her. Chapter 104. Little Red, Shi asked in confusion. He followed the direction my finger pointed and looked carefully for a few seconds before he found the very inconspicuous little red dot. I don't think so, Shi said uncertainly. This red dot is too inconspicuous. No one would stare at people normally. I nodded, but I was even more confused. The space between the eyebrows was where the soul resided. Inserting needles here would greatly affect the soul. Some unorthodox metaphysical sects would insert needles in the space between the eyebrows when using sorcery on people to split and scatter the soul. Did Lin Yuedong offend someone from metaphysics world? But she was just a university student. How did she get involved with people from the metaphysics world? Also, I couldn't explain the behavior of barking like a dog. There were many ways to harm people in the metaphysics world, but I've never heard of such a situation. This matter was very troublesome. If Lin Yuedong was still conscious or could contact her family, then we should be able to get some valuable clues and slowly solve the mystery. But now, there were no clues, and I had no idea where to start. After thinking about it, I decided to try using a special talisman recorded in death scripture. This talisman was called Soul-Seeking Talisman. Its actual use was similar to the Soul-Searching Seal I saw Zhao Yongquan use before, but the Soul-Searching Seal was more domineering. It forcefully searched for information from the soul, while the Soul-Seeking Talisman allowed the unconscious soul to temporarily possess human thoughts and then communicate with people. In terms of effect, the Soul-Searching Seal was much better than the Soul-Seeking Talisman. If I wanted to know something, I just had to search the soul. It was simple and effective. Unfortunately, the hand seal could only be used after reaching the pressure point realm. I couldn't use it all right now, so I could only use the Soul-Seeking Talisman instead. But then again, the Soul-Seeking Talisman also had benefits that the Soul-Searching Seal didn't have. The Soul-Searching Seal could only be used on weaker souls. For example, a Feng Shui master in the pressure point realm couldn't use the Soul-Searching Seal against a Feng Shui master in the Glory of Consciousness realm, because if he used it, he would definitely be devoured. However, the Soul-Seeking Talisman didn't have this problem. Even if it was the soul of a heavenly master, I could use the Soul-Seeking Talisman to communicate, but whether or not the soul was willing to talk to me was not something I could control. The Soul-Seeking Talisman is a very unorthodox talisman, and I have never made one before. Now that I need to use it, I can only make one at the last minute. I asked Dainanzhou to contact his uncle, Wang Yongjun, asking him to send me the wolf hair brush, cinnabar, and yellow talisman paper I needed to make talismans. Ever since I helped Wang Yongjun deal with the Meow Girl Zhao Ying's matter and agreed to work in his company, Wang Yongjun's attitude toward me had been very good. The hotel directly booked a 1-year stay for me and even paid me half a year's salary in advance. If there was anything, I just had to call him, and he would definitely be more attentive than me. Less than half an hour after Dainanzhou made the call, the sound of a speeding car came from downstairs. I went to the balcony and saw a black Mercedes-Benz MPV parked under the dormitory. Wang Yongjun and the driver that picked me up a few times last time got out of the car together. Dainanzhou hurriedly ran downstairs and brought Wang Yongjun and the other man back to the dormitory. I was flattered to see Wang Yongjun. He had a dozen or so electronics factories under him with tens of thousands of workers. He was very busy every day, but he actually personally came to deliver something to me. I quickly walked over to take the paper bag from his hands and said, "Boss Wang, you could have just sent someone over. Why did you personally come?" Wang Yongjun laughed heartily. "I had nothing better to do. At the last exchange meeting, I sat in the guest seats and personally saw Master Zhou take 2 first places. I was extremely happy at the time. I knew that Master Zhou's cultivation realm wasn't shallow, but I didn't think that Master Zhou would be able to suppress a province and take first place. Afterwards, I thought about it and realized that the annual salary I gave you before was too low. After today's matter, I'll have Xiao Zhao bring you another contract. I'll raise your annual salary to 5 million. His words made me feel embarrassed. Before, he still called me younger brother Zhou, but now that I was in the limelight at the exchange meeting, he directly called me Master Zhou. I wryly smiled and said, "I'm Nanzhou's classmate, and you're my elder. I can't accept being called that. Just call me younger brother like before." After much persuasion, Wang Yongjun finally changed the way he addressed me. Afterwards, he sighed with emotion and praised me. It seems that younger brother Zhou is not only skilled, but also modest. There aren't many youngsters with your temperament. During the small talk, I originally wanted to decline the matter of the annual salary increase, but now that I didn't have the chance to say it, I simply didn't say anything. With Wang Yongjun's net worth, there wasn't much difference between 2 million and 5 million. Next, I took out the tools from the paper bag and prepared to make talismans. Wang Yongjun understood the taboo of a feng shui master. He didn't need me to say anything and called Dainan Zhou and the others to leave, leaving me alone in the dormitory. I went to the balcony outside to wash my hands before returning. I spread out the yellow talisman paper and silently chanted the tranquil heart incantation. When a feng shui master makes talismans, they must be sincere. Moreover, they must clean their hands, body, and heart. In this way, they can draw in Dao Qi and create talismans with miraculous effects. After busying myself for a while, a brand new soul inquiring talisman was made. After I called Wang Yongjun and the others in, they all had a curious expression on their faces. They stared at the talisman on the table without blinking. Dai Nanzhou curiously asked me about the use of the talisman. Before I could open my mouth, Wang Yongjun helped me. "Nanzhou, don't ask. This little girl has been unconscious for 2 or 3 days. Let's first see how younger brother Zhou will save her. As for the use of the talisman, won't you see in a moment?" After saying that, he turned his head and asked me, "Younger brother Zhou, can we save her now?" I shook my head and said, "There's no rush. I still need something else. I'll have to trouble Uncle Wang to help me find a few eggs. I don't want the eggs from the farm sold in the market. I want the free-range eggs from the countryside, the ones that have been fertilized." Many people who grew up in the city might not know that there were 2 types of eggs. One was fertilized and the other was unfertilized. In the past, a classmate of mine made a joke. On a whim, he wanted to study how to hatch chicks, so he bought a bag of eggs from the supermarket. After returning to the dormitory, he covered the bag with a blanket to hatch it in the middle of the summer. In the end, a few days later, this guy was dumbfounded. The chicks didn't hatch, and instead, the dormitory was filled with the smell of rotten eggs. When I heard about this, I almost laughed myself to death. Even if this guy gave the eggs to an old hen, he still wouldn't be able to hatch chicks. The reason was simple. These eggs weren't fertilized. Many people may take it for granted that hens can only lay eggs after being fertilized, but in fact, there is no need for a rooster. Hens can lay eggs on their own, but the eggs they lay are unfertilized eggs. After mating with a rooster, the eggs that are laid are fertilized eggs that can be hatched into chicks. This small matter was naturally not difficult for Wang Yongjun. Soon, he asked someone to get some free-range eggs. He also specifically asked the egg seller to contact the chicken farmers. After confirming that the eggs were laid by free-range chickens, he sent them over. After getting the eggs, I picked out a relatively round one and lightly knocked a small hole in the corner of the table. Then I walked to the sink outside and shook off the egg white and yolk bit by bit. Afterward, I poured water in and rinsed it a few times to make sure there was nothing left inside. After doing all of this, I rolled the soul inquiring talisman that I had just made into a thin roll and slowly stuffed it into the eggshell, leaving only a corner outside. Then, I walked to Lin Yuedong's bedside and guided my energy into the soul inquiring talisman. Then, the corner of the talisman on the outside of the eggshell suddenly burned. In an instant, the entire egg turned red. However, no matter how fiercely the talisman burned, the eggshell didn't crack. I also didn't feel any heat when I held the eggshell. Chapter 105. Dainan Zhou and the others looked at me curiously. At this time, Zhou couldn't help but ask, "Brother Zhou, what's the use of this egg?" I smiled and said, "Don't look down on this egg. In our profession, an egg, especially a perfectly round egg, represents Tai Chi, the egg white, and the egg yolk represent the primal chaos of yin and yang. A person's soul is in chaos and doesn't have a consciousness. Only through this egg can we communicate with it. You can use this egg to communicate with a person's soul?" Dai Nanzhou's eyes were filled with disbelief as he asked. I shook my head. "It's not enough to rely on this egg. We need this soul inquiring talisman." Then, I didn't explain further and placed the egg between Lin Yuedong's eyebrows. The egg was perfectly round, and a person's forehead was flat. Normally, the egg wouldn't be stable. However, after I let go, the perfectly round egg stood upright and didn't move an inch. The curiosity in the eyes of the surrounding people became stronger. After everything was done, I asked Dainan Zhou and the others to close all the doors and windows of the dormitory. I also covered all the curtains. The originally bright dormitory room instantly darkened. I found a candle, lit it, and placed it on Lin Yuedong's bedside. "You can stand here and watch. However, without my permission, don't talk or take deep breaths," I reminded them. After Wang Yongjun and the others heard me, their faces became solemn. They nodded and promised me that they wouldn't talk. I stretched out my hand and gathered my Tao energy to touch the hole in the eggshell. Then I opened my mouth and read, "Ask the spirit and open the spirit. Ferry the soul and the person." 3 souls returned to their original position. "Lin Yuedong, do you know why you are unconscious?" After I said that, everyone's eyes gazed at Lin Yuedong. However, she was still lying there without moving. It seemed that she didn't have any reaction. Asking the spirit required time. I had to use my Tao energy to temporarily open the spirit of Lin Yuedong's soul. Only then would she respond to me. I wasn't in a hurry at all. I sat there and waited quietly. On the other hand, Dainan Zhou and the others were affected by the quiet and solemn atmosphere in the dormitory room. Everyone's breathing became heavy, which was very clear in the quiet room. I knew that they probably didn't have anything to fear, but that was how people were. Their emotions were easily influenced by their surroundings. That was why I had warned them not to breathe too deeply. However, they were standing far away from Lin Yuedong. As long as they didn't breathe directly at Lin Yuedong, it wouldn't affect her too much. I wasn't too worried. Around 7 or 8 minutes later, the candle by Lin Yuedong's bedside table suddenly flickered. A cold wind came out of nowhere and blew a few strands of Lin Yuedong's hair. Feeling the cold wind, I felt happy and looked at Lin Yuedong's face. "Oh, what's wrong with me?" Lin Yuedong's lips didn't move, but a timid woman's voice arose. It sounded a little illusory. "You're in a coma. I used a talisman to temporarily open the spirit of your soul. Now, your soul is communicating with me. You don't need to be afraid. Tell me why you're unconscious." After I asked, the timid woman's voice disappeared. She didn't say anything for quite a long time. Just as I was getting impatient, the voice arose one more time. She hesitantly said, I'm not possessed. I've been like this since I was a child. Every few years, I would suddenly bark like a dog in my sleep. After that, I would fall into a coma. I went to see a doctor, and the doctor said that I have a fetish for mimicry, which is accompanied by epilepsy." Fetish for mimicry? Epilepsy? I frowned. If Dainan Zhou had told me this before, I would have believed her. However, her mother had chanted Buddhist scriptures to her, and her weak soul had told me that it wasn't that simple. I said in a low voice, "Lin Yuedong, you've been in a coma for 3 days. Your soul is very weak, and something bad could happen at any time. Moreover, I can't contact your family. If you don't tell me the truth, I won't be able to help you if something bad happens. You should think about the consequences yourself." The voice went silent. Around half a minute later, she said, "Actually, my symptoms are related to my family's factory. However, I don't know if I'm possessed or not." Lin Yuetong finally opened her heart. I exhaled in relief and quietly listened to her story. Lin Yuetong wasn't a native of Shenzhen. She was from Yulin City, which was located in the southeast of Guangxi. Yulin City had a long history, and it was known as the Dog Forest in ancient times. There was a local proverb that said, "Fish is raw during the winter solstice, and dog is eaten during the summer solstice." Thus, when the summer solstice arrived, the local people would eat dog meat and eat lychees. Gradually, it became a custom, and there was a festival called the Yulin Lychee Dog Meat Festival. The local custom of eating dog meat was very popular, and there were many proverbs that mentioned it. For example, after eating dog meat, don't cover yourself with a blanket. Rolling dog meat 3 times, even the gods can't stand still. Dog meat is fragrant. Buddha jumps over the wall. Dog on the summer solstice. Dog has nowhere to go. Fish is raw during the winter solstice. Dog on the summer solstice. How many delicacies are there in a year, and so on. In recent years, the annual Lychee Dog Meat Festival in Yulin caused a large number of dogs to be slaughtered. People from all walks of life denounced and opposed this event. Some people even called it the Yulin Slaughter Incident. Since the local dog meat was consumed a lot, many related industries were created. Lin Yuetong's father operated a local slaughterhouse, which specialized in slaughtering dogs. Mr. Lin had entered the business early. More than 20 years ago, before Lin Yuetong was born, he had already operated this slaughterhouse. He lived there until he got married and had children. In other words, Lin Yuetong was born and raised in this slaughterhouse. According to her, when dogs were killed in the slaughterhouse, some dogs would always let out violent screams before they died. When she was still a baby, she was awakened by the screams of a dog when she was sleeping. At that time, she became stupid. After finding someone to take a look at her, they said that she had lost her soul. Then, her parents found someone to help her call her soul. Gradually, she got better. But from then on, every once in a while, Lin Yuetong would inexplicably bark like a dog in her sleep. Then, she would become stupid and wouldn't recognize anyone. At the same time, her whole body would twitch and she would fall into a coma. The symptoms were exactly the same as this time. At that time, her parents took her to see a doctor and also to Yin Yang Xian. The doctor said that she had epilepsy and mimicry, while Yin Yang Xian said that when she was a child, she didn't call back her own soul. Instead, she called back the soul of a dog, which was why she got this strange disease in the future. Both sides said different things, but the same thing was that there was nothing they could do about her illness. Later on, when her mother took her to a temple to pray to Buddha, she accidentally heard some Buddhist scriptures. That was when she calmed down and gradually got better. From then on, her mother bought a lot of Buddhist scriptures and read them silently every day. When she had an attack, she would read them to her. It was very effective every time. But this time, she didn't know why she was in a coma. After listening to her, I vaguely understood. However, I didn't agree with her. When she was a child, she was scared by a dog's barking and lost her soul. Then, she called for a dog's soul. It was impossible if she didn't know anything about geomancy. The result of my consideration was that her mother had been affected by the resentful energy in the slaughterhouse when she had been pregnant with her. Lin Yuedong, who had been in the womb at that time, was at the stage where her 3 souls had formed, just like Tong Tong. The difference was that Tong Tong died when his 3 souls were formed, but Lin Yuedong was affected by the dog soul that was full of resentment when her 3 souls were formed. There were some dog souls in her soul, which led to the later symptoms. After understanding all this, I sighed with emotion. When it came to eating dog meat, different people had different views. It was hard to say whether it was right or wrong. However, Even if it was a slaughterhouse, they had to pay attention to the way they handled the animals. Barbaric slaughtering not only made the animals suffer, but it also affected people. This was especially true for children and pregnant women. If they didn't have to go to slaughterhouses, they would try to avoid them. However, after understanding the reason, I still didn't understand Lin Yuedong's situation. When her 3 souls were formed, they were mixed with the souls of other animals. This kind of situation wasn't really serious because the souls of animals were weak. They weren't as strong as human souls. Thus, they wouldn't affect people too much. It was just like what Lin Yuedong had told me. After all these years, as long as she listened to Buddhist scriptures, her symptoms would be alleviated. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.